Chapter 1. In the 63rd year of Dewey's Qingyuan, in the 3rd month of spring, the rain was drizzling. The new greenery in the city was shrouded in a layer of mist, soaking the land. The roof tiles of the Su family's residence in the capital were washed by the rain, revealing a layer of uniform luster. These were half-moon tiles shipped from Yunzhou. It was said that when moonlight shone on the roof, it would look like fireflies perched on the roof. The firing process of these tiles was complicated, and the price was not simple either. A full roof tile would cost an ordinary family dozens of years of hard work. However, the Su family in the capital had a silk business all over the country, so a roof tile was at most a drop in the bucket. Lord Su was the tutor of the current crown prince. He had 2 sons. The eldest, Su Zhiheng, stood alone. At a young age, he was already a Hanlin scholar, and everyone in the capital praised him. Su Zhiheng also had a wife. When he was 18, he married the daughter of the second master of the He family, He Yin. The eldest son of the He family, He Rufei, was the current emperor's general Feihong. The marriage between a scholar and a warrior could be considered a well-matched match. "Madam, what would you like?" A delicate maidservant in a thin gown handed her a cup of hot tea and asked crisply. "I'm going out for a walk," He Yin replied and drank the tea in one gulp. "But it's raining outside." "It's fine. I'll hold an umbrella." The maidservant looked at the young woman in front of her. The Su family was a scholarly family, and the women were all dressed elegantly. Young Mistress Su was the same. However, the green feather satin robe on her made her look petty and out of place. In fact, Grandmother Su was very good-looking. Her facial features were distinct and heroic, and her eyes were like a cleansed lake, clear and distant. Unfortunately, she was blind. Grandmother Su was not born blind. 3 months after marrying into the Su family, she suddenly contracted a strange illness. She had a high fever for 2 days and 2 nights, and when she woke up, she could no longer see. The Su family invited many divine doctors, but they were still helpless. After that, Grandmother Su did not go out often. It was inconvenient for a blind person to go out. He Yin walked to the pavilion by the pond in the courtyard. After marrying into the Su family for a year, she went blind after 3 months. In the remaining 9 months, she learned to live without her eyes and adapted very well. Occasionally, she would miss the days when she could see. For example, right now, she could hear the sound of rainwater falling into the pond and feel the red carps fighting for food in the pond, but she couldn't see anything. An unseen spring was a good spring, just like an unseen person. Perhaps she had gone blind too early, so she couldn't even remember Su Zhiheng's current appearance. The only thing she could remember was when she saw Su Zhiheng when she was 14 years old. The young man in green stretched out his hand to her with a warm smile. The current Su Zhiheng would not stretch out his hand to her. Although He Yin treated her gently and politely, there was a layer of something between them. He Yin could feel it, but she wouldn't say it. When she was young, she had spent many years in the military. She had learned to deal with men as a man, but she didn't know how to be a woman. Therefore, she could only watch Su Zhiheng and his concubine mother, Madame He, being gentle and affectionate. She felt sad and tired. She simply couldn't see it anymore. Even these heart-wrenching scenes were saved, so she had a lot of leisure time. She sat quietly in the pavilion. Suddenly, she remembered the years when she was young and the days when she followed the army. It was also a spring day like this. The rain was drizzling. She sat in the middle of the soldiers and drank a bowl of strong wine with a smile. She felt her whole body heat up. This heat engulfed her body in a flash. He Yin supported herself on the railing. Waves of sweetness gushed out from her throat. With a peep sound, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Someone's footsteps slowly approached. He Yin asked, "Shall I?" There was no answer. The footsteps stopped. He Yin frowned slightly. "Madam He?" A moment later, a woman's voice sounded. Madam has good hearing. A strange feeling rose in her chest. Her many years of intuition made her subconsciously take a defensive posture. Madam He had always been gentle and careful. She didn't say many words to her in the fu. Suddenly, she came and spoke in such a proud tone. He Yin felt uneasy, but she also felt strange. She wasn't a competent mistress. In the fu, she was more like a decoration. She couldn't stop Madame He from seeking favor. A blind person was no threat to Madame He. Madame He didn't need to and had no reason to deal with her. What's the matter? He Wanru stroked the hairpin in her hair. It was Su Jihung who gave it to her yesterday. Suddenly, she remembered that the person in front of her couldn't see. She regretfully withdrew her hand and said, "Madam, you are pregnant." Yin froze in place. "A few days ago, the doctor who looked at your eyes took your pulse. You are pregnant." Yin didn't know what to do, but a trace of joy appeared. She was about to speak when she heard Madame He sigh again. "What a pity! What a pity!" Yan's smile disappeared. She asked, "What's a pity?" "It's a pity that this child can't be kept." Yin said sternly, "Madame He, how dare you?" Her long, shapely eyebrows were raised, and her gaze was like a knife. Although she was blind, her expression was frightening. Wanru's hair stood on end. But after a moment, she steadied her mind and said, "I'm not the only one who said this, General He." Yan's scalp went numb when she heard the words, "General He." She asked, "What do you know?" "I know everything that I should know. I also know everything that I shouldn't know. General He, with such a big secret, how can the He family and Su family dare to tolerate you?" Yin couldn't speak. Before the He family had a general like General Feihong, they were like all the noble families in Dawei. They were even on the verge of decline. 19 years ago, the He family's sisters-in-law gave birth at the same time. The He family's eldest young mistress gave birth to He Rufei, and the He family's second young mistress gave birth to He Yin. He Rufei should have the title of nobility, but He Rufei was born with a weak body. The doctor said that he wouldn't live past the age of 3. He Rufei died, and the title of nobility was taken away from the He family. The entire family was left with nothing. The He family discussed it and made a bold decision. He Yin replaced He Rufei. He Rufei lied that he was He Yin. He was born with a weak body and was sent to the temple to recuperate. He Yin grew up with He Rufei's identity. Although she was born in the second branch, she grew up in the first branch. Since she was young, she thought of herself as a boy and liked to practice martial arts. When she was 14, she joined the Fuyue army behind her family's back. Gradually, she became famous in the military campaigns. She even received the title of General Feihong from the emperor and had the opportunity to enter the palace to meet the emperor. It was at this time that He Rufei, who was sent to the temple to recuperate, returned. He Rufei didn't die. He even lived peacefully until he was 18 years old. He looked agile, healthy, and handsome. Thus, everything returned to its original state. He Rufei met the emperor and became General Feihong. He Yin was still He Yin. Everything wasn't as difficult as imagined. In order to prevent a situation like today's, the He family had long made a rule that He Yin would wear a mask and no one would see He Rufei's appearance. He Yin was arranged by the He family to marry the current Hanlin Academy scholar, the young talent Su Jihung. Su Jihung was handsome, gentle, considerate, and polite. His mother-in-law was also generous and never treated him harshly. For a woman, this was the best marriage. He Yin also used to think this way. Until today, her mask of warmth was torn apart. The bloody truth was even more chilling than the most difficult battle she had ever faced on the battlefield. That bowl of soup that poisoned you was personally ordered by the elders of your family to send it over. Only the dead can keep secrets. As long as you're alive, you're a huge threat to them. When you were taking the medicine, eldest young master was watching from the room next door. If you died, the He family and the Su family would only be relieved. You only have yourself to blame. Yin laughed loudly. Blame her? Blame her for what? Blame her for taking He Rufei's identity for the benefit of her family? Blame her for being obsessed with martial arts and learning to join the army? Should she be blamed for drinking blood on the battlefield and killing the enemy to the bitter end? Or blame her for kissing His Majesty and being bestowed the title of General Feihong and letting He Rufei receive her meritorious service? Blame her. Blame her for being a woman. Because she was a woman, she couldn't use her own name to make achievements openly. Because she was a woman, she deserved to pave the way for the He family and the men of the He family. In the end, she overestimated the He family's humanity and underestimated the He family's selfishness. And Su Jihung, she should have been blind a long time ago to think that he was good. What are you laughing at? He Wanru frowned and asked. I'm laughing at you. Ian looked in her direction and said word by word, I'm laughing at how ridiculous you are. I died because of a secret. Do you think you can still live after knowing this secret? Hiwanru sneered. You're about to die, and you're still so stubborn. Guards quickly appeared and surrounded Hien. Kill her. Willow branches could be used as weapons. They were soft and tough, just like a woman's hand. They were clearly light branches with new shoots on them. They were like a sword embroidered with flowers and could brush away the opponent's sword. Hiwanru had also heard of General Feihong's name. She knew that the woman was brave and good at fighting and didn't seem like an ordinary girl. But only when she saw it with her own eyes did she know that the rumors were true. Hien was already blind, but she could still fight against Tin. She kicked away the guards in front of her, as if she wanted to break through the encirclement in this gloomy house and ride her horse back. No one could stop her. But suddenly, she fell from the air like a wild goose shot by an arrow. The blood she spat out splashed on the grass like little wildflowers. The cup of tea that Xiao Dai handed to her. She lost her sight and now even her 5 senses. She was truly a blind person, a cornered beast. In order to kill her, they really made foolproof preparations. A bunch of idiots. Now, Hiwanru said anxiously. Hien wanted to raise her head. Bang! She felt a sharp pain in her knee. The person behind her hit her leg heavily. Her legs went soft and she almost knelt down. But in the next moment, she was punched in the back again. The fists fell in disorder and hit her body like raindrops. Her internal organs hurt. They wouldn't hurt her with a sword or leave a trace of evidence on her body. Someone pulled her hair and dragged her to the edge of the pond. Her head was pushed down violently. The cold water went over her eyes, nose, mouth, and neck. Hien couldn't speak anymore. Her body fell heavily, but she struggled to look up. The water was getting farther and farther away from her. The sky was like the sunlight. For a moment, she felt like she had returned to her hometown. She vaguely heard the songs sung during the march. Her companions read letters home in their local accent, accompanied by Madam, he's panicked crying. Guards, Madam is drowning. She wanted to go home, but she was homeless. Chapter 2. The spring rain seemed to have no end as it continued to fall. However, the room was very warm. The fire in the stove burned brightly. The lid of the boiling medicine pot was pushed up by the steam, and one could clearly hear the gurgling sound of the pot. The girl sat in front of the mirror. In the bronze mirror, a slightly pale face appeared. She had long frowns on her face, thin green and red. Her lips were like small water chestnuts, pursed, delicate and pretty. Her pair of almond-shaped eyes were black and moist, like a mountain stream that was about to gather mist in the next moment. The mist slowly dispersed, revealing a magnificent gem. She had snow-white skin and a flower-like appearance. She was a beautiful girl, but that was all there was to it. Of course, she knew her own beauty very well. Therefore, in front of the small dressing table, there was already rouge, face powder, and spice bomb. The smell of the rouge lingered around her. Hien wrinkled her nose and couldn't help but sneeze. The bronze mirror was immediately covered with a layer of white frost from the hot breath she exhaled. Even her face became unclear. Hien was in a trance for a moment, as if she had returned to the moment when she first took off her male disguise. She also sat in front of the mirror like this, looking at herself in the mirror as if a lifetime had passed. She had been drowned in the Su family's pond by the He family's men. However, when she woke up, she had become Hien. She wasn't the current General Feihong, He Rufei's younger sister, Su Jiheng's wife, Hien. Instead, she was the owner of this dilapidated house, the 9th-ranked military officer of the city gate, He Sui's eldest daughter, Hien. They were both Hien. Their statuses were as different as clouds and mud. Yin, why didn't you say you were awake? Accompanied by a voice from outside, the door curtain was lifted and a figure swept in with a cold wind. It was a middle-aged man with sideburns. He had a square face, dark skin, and a tall figure. He looked like a clumsy but strong bear. His smile carried a trace of cautiousness. Seeing that there was no one in the room, he shouted loudly, "Qingmei, where's Qingmei?" "Qingmei went to pick medicinal herbs," He Yin said softly. The man scratched his head and said, "Oh, then Daddy will pour it for you." The white porcelain bowl was not even as big as the man's palm. He knew this, so he poured the medicine very carefully. The room was immediately filled with the bitter fragrance of the herbs. He Yin looked at the plum blossoms on the side of the medicine bowl and shifted his gaze to the man's face. This was He Yan's father, the captain of the city gate, He Sui. The word father was unfamiliar to He Yin. Her biological father should be the second master of the He family, He Yuanliang. However, because she had taken on the identity of He Rufei, she could only call He Yuanliang's second uncle. Her adoptive father, He Yuanqing, was actually her uncle. The relationship between her adoptive father and her wasn't very close. When she first proposed to learn martial arts, their relationship had dropped to the freezing point. It was only after she earned merits and received the emperor's commendation that she became enthusiastic. In the past few years, although the first branch didn't deprive her of food and drink, they didn't really understand what she was thinking. When He Yin was young, she thought it was because he wasn't her biological father. However, her biological father, He Yuanliang, also treated her indifferently. It was probably because a daughter that was given away was like water that was spilled. Since he didn't raise her by his side, their relationship faded. Therefore, He Yin didn't remember her father's appearance as clearly as her brothers and subordinates. He Sui had already poured the medicine into the bowl. He carefully scooped up the residue floating on the surface of the water and gently blew on it. He brought it to He Yin and was about to feed her. He Yin took the bowl of medicine and said, "I'll do it myself." The man withdrew his hand and said embarrassedly, "Okay." Niao Niao steam rose from the medicine bowl. He Yin looked at the bowl of medicine in front of her hesitantly. She thought of what Madam He said before she died. That bowl of medicine that blinded you was personally sent by an elder in your family. The elder in the family? Was it He Yuanqing? Or He Yuanliang? Or was it someone else? Su Zhiheng knew about it. What about the others? She thought of the day she drowned and the cup of hot tea that Xiao Dai gave her. Who knew if the things sent by others had ulterior motives? He Sui saw that she didn't drink it and thought that she thought the medicine was too bitter. He smiled and coaxed her, "Yin Yin, don't be afraid. It's not bitter. You'll be fine after drinking the medicine." He Yin didn't hesitate anymore. Before He Sui could continue speaking, she put her lips to the bowl and poured the medicine into her mouth. Wait. He Sui didn't have time to say anything. He Yin had already put the empty bowl on the table. He spat out the remaining words in his mouth. "It's hot. It's not hot," He Yin answered. He Sui didn't know what to say for a while. He stammered a few times and whispered, "Then you should rest well in the room. Don't run around. Father will go to the martial arts field first." He took the empty bowl away. He Yin was left alone in the room. She was slightly relieved. After all, she wasn't used to communicating with people so intimately, especially as a woman. Moreover, she was a young girl who was pampered and raised in the palm of his hand. His servant Qing Mei hadn't come back yet. He Sui didn't have a lot of money every month. The captain of the gate guards was just a military officer with no real power. He didn't have much money. The people in this room relied on He Sui's money to support themselves. He could only afford to hire one servant. The rest of the money probably became the rouge and face powder that Miss He piled up on the table. He Yin stood up and walked to the door. This body was soft, like white jade, fragrant and tender. It was completely unfamiliar to her. Without strength, she couldn't protect herself. If there was something special about this body, it would be a pair of clean and bright eyes. It could let her see the light of the world that she hadn't seen for a long time. Dong! There was the sound of something heavy falling behind her. He Yin turned around and saw a young man standing in front of her. He was removing the firewood that was tied to his shoulders. The young man was young, about the same age as He Yin. He wore a green waistline shirt and pants of the same color. There was a white cloth tied around his legs to make it easier for him to work. His skin was slightly dark. His eyebrows and eyes were similar to He Yan's. He was delicate and handsome, but his chin was slightly narrower. He looked determined and stubborn. This was Lady He's younger brother, He Sui's youngest son, He Yunsheng. He Yin had been lying in bed for the past few days. He Yunsheng came several times, but he always came to bring water and the stove. He didn't say a word to He Yin. The relationship between the brother and sister didn't seem to be very good. But Hien looked at He Yunxing's rough and ill-fitting clothes and then looked at her own little green satin dress. She slightly understood, but was also surprised. In the He family, the women paved the way for the men. The men were the sky and the earth, as if they were the center of the world. However, in this family, it was different. It seemed that this biological youngest son was picked up. The He family only cared about Lady He's food and clothes. Why was this? Hien stood in front of He Yunsheng and didn't move a step. He Yunsheng piled the firewood under the eaves and began to chop the firewood. This family was really poor. The only servant was a maid, and the biological son did the work of a manservant. In front of Hien was the pile of firewood. He Yunsheng chopped it twice and slightly frowned. "Excuse me, you are blocking my way." He didn't even call her sister. Hien didn't move at all. He didn't move aside, nor did he taunt him with his usual sarcastic remarks. He Yunsheng couldn't help but raise his head and meet Hien's serious eyes. Hien said, "You can't chop the firewood like this." Chapter 3. He Yunsheng furrowed his brows and asked, "What did you say?" Hien didn't move and repeated seriously, "I said, you can't chop the firewood like this." The youth became impatient. "Hien, if you're sick, then go back to your room. Don't look for trouble here. If you chop like this, you won't be able to finish even when the sky turns dark." Hien didn't move an inch. He Yunsheng seemed to suddenly become angry. The axe slipped out of his hand and heavily hit the bluestone floor, making a loud noise. He took a step forward and angrily said, "If you didn't spend money because of your illness, Father wouldn't have sent the manservant away. You still know that you have to chop until the sky turns dark. If you haven't chopped firewood before, then don't point fingers. If you're so good at chopping, then do it." Hien's heart slightly moved. So there was a manservant at home. It was just that the family was poor, and in order to see a doctor, they sent the manservant away. This youth took over the manservant's job. Looking at his appearance, he seemed to have accumulated resentment towards this elder sister for a long time. He sneered and ridiculed her without any mercy. Being poor also had its advantages. For example, there was no one in the courtyard, so the embarrassing scene between this pair of siblings would not be seen by others. If it was in the He family and Su family in the past, the maidservants who came to watch the show would probably form a troop of soldiers and horses. After He Yunsheng finished speaking, he waited for Hien to jump up and scold her. However, to his surprise, Hien didn't scold her this time. Instead, she bent down and picked up the axe that he threw on the ground. She was dropped by the heavy axe. Her slender wrist seemed to be unable to withstand the destruction. It was a frightening sight. Hien looked at her hand and frowned slightly. She couldn't even lift the axe. Compared to her past self, she was far worse. He Yunsheng was stunned and suspiciously asked, "What are you doing?" "I'll chop it for you to see," Hien replied. When He Yunsheng heard this, he became even angrier and angrily said, "Don't pester endlessly, you." Before he could finish his words, a bang sound interrupted his voice. Hien had already raised the axe and cleanly chopped the firewood in front of him into two. "Look," she said, "it's very simple. You can't hold the front end of the axe. You have to hold the end of the handle and chop along the lines of the wood. It'll save a lot of energy." He Yunsheng stared at her blankly. After a while, the young man's face turned red and his tone was almost angry. He pointed at Hien and said, You really have ulterior motives. Your hand. Father will definitely scold me when he comes back. Hien, you're really scheming, crafty, and treacherous." Huh. Hien didn't understand. The next moment, a panicked female voice sounded, "Miss, you're bleeding." Hien subconsciously lowered his head and looked at his palm. He didn't know when the skin on his palm had been scraped. Blood was reflected in his palm. It was so fresh that it was even a little moving. She had only used the axe to chop a piece of firewood, and she had already scraped her hand? Just how delicate was this body? Since he was young, had Lady He ever carried anything that was slightly heavier? Was she made of cotton and tofu? Hien fell into deep thought. The maidservant, Qing Mei, had already rushed over and pulled him into the room. She hurriedly said, "You have to rub it with ointment first." I don't know if it will leave a scar. He Yunshin glared at her hatefully and said, He Yin, you're going to court death sooner or later. Then he turned around and ran away. He Yin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In her previous life, she had lived from her marriage to her death. Until now, this was the first time someone had said that she was courting. This feeling was very novel. In the hearts of soldiers, courting was probably a very distant word. Qingmei placed He Yan's hand on her knee and used her fingertips to gently rub the ointment onto He Yan's palm. After that, she cried again. What if it leaves a scar? We have to find a way to get some scar removal ointment. It's okay. He Yan couldn't bear to see a girl cry, especially a beautiful girl who was 15 or 16 years old. She was younger than he was in his previous life. He comforted her. If it leaves a scar, it'll leave a scar. It's fine as long as it's healed. Qingmei widened her eyes and forgot to wipe her tears. She stared at He Yan speechlessly. What's wrong? He Yan asked. No, nothing. Qingmei wiped her tears and stood up. As long as you're not angry, it's fine. The tone of her words. He Yan looked at the cosmetics and jewelry placed in front of the dressing table. He roughly understood what was going on. In his previous life, Lady He was very particular about her appearance. Her delicate skin must have been pampered. It would be a big deal if she accidentally broke it. Did the heavens see that her previous life was too rough and had never experienced the feeling of being a daughter? In this life, they gave her such a delicate body that couldn't even withstand the wind and rain. Qingmei asked, Young lady, let this servant pour you a cup of hot tea. It was raining outside just now, and you've caught a cold. Wait. He Yan stopped her. I remembered something. When I woke up earlier, there were some things that I couldn't remember clearly. She looked at Qingmei. How did I get sick? Originally, there was a manservant in this house. Later, the manservant who came to treat He Yan's illness was sent away. It could be seen that this illness wasn't present at birth. But if it was a sudden illness, she didn't feel any discomfort these past few days. Everyone in the house looked at her carefully, as if they were afraid of any accidents. He Yan felt strange. Qingmei heard this and turned pale with fright. She grabbed He Yan's hand and almost cried again. Young lady, you've already been sad for Master Fan. You can't go through this again. Even if it's not for yourself, you have to think about Master and young Master. Master Fan? Man? He Yan asked. Which Master Fan? Young lady, what do you mean by that? Yes, Master Fan is so heartless. He's not a good match. Young lady, you're right to forget him. This servant won't mention Master Fan again. I just want young lady to be well. Qingmei finished speaking and wiped her eyes again. This little maid really loved to cry too much. Even the new recruits under her tent didn't cry so much on their first time on the battlefield. She hadn't asked much, but her lapel was already wet. If this continued, in less than the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the water would flood Jinshan Mountain. Fine, He Yan said helplessly. Then let's not talk about it. Go and change your clothes. Your clothes are wet. Qingmei stared at He Yan with wide eyes. She saw that He Yan was calm and didn't look like he was about to collapse. She hesitated for a moment and said, Then this servant will go and change. Young lady, please wait for this servant. This servant will be right back. Then she walked away, looking back every few steps. The house became quiet again. He Yan stretched out his hand and opened his palm. Qingmei's ointment was still in her hand. She looked at her delicate hand, lost in thought. Women were naturally weaker than men. In order to practice hand strength, He Yan used to sneak out of the manor's back door every day before dawn and climb up Donghuang Mountain in the capital to help the monks carry water and chop firewood. In the beginning, the skin on her hands was also worn out like this. Gradually, calluses grew on her hands, and she was able to carry 2 buckets of water with ease. She could even practice martial arts with Shi hanging from her wrists. She wasn't smart, so she could only use stupid methods. Over time, she also gained the qualifications to compete with men. But now, everything was back to square one. Not to mention taking away what originally belonged to her. Her weak body couldn't bear the brunt of the thorny road she had to walk in the future. Then let's practice, He Yan said to herself. Just like before. Perhaps this was a test given to her by heaven as the price for her rebirth. But there was nothing to be afraid of. She was just starting all over again. Chapter 4. The next day, the rain stopped and it was a beautiful sunny day. The blue stone in the courtyard was warm from the sun and had a lush green color. Hien woke up when the rooster crowed for the third time. When Qingmei woke up, she found Hien was not in bed and was shocked. She looked around and found Hien sitting on the stone block in the courtyard in a daze. She was relieved. "Miss, why are you up so early? Is it because the quilt is too thin and cold?" Qingmei asked. "It's nothing, I can't sleep," Hien replied. She did not have the habit of being lazy. In the military camp, she could not relax for even a moment. Even at night, she had to be on guard against the enemy's surprise attack, so she was always alert. Moreover, she wanted to practice martial arts when she was young, so she really did dance at the sound of the rooster. Later, when she married into the Su family, she still could not change her old habits and was ridiculed behind her back. However, after she became blind, she did not wake up so early. There was no difference between day and night to her. She still woke up when the rooster crowed, but she would wait until everyone in the courtyard had woken up before she followed. She wanted to make herself feel less out of place. "Where is father?" she asked. "Master has already gone to the military field. Young master has also just woken up. Miss, change your clothes and come eat," Qingmei said and trotted to the kitchen. There was only one servant in the house, but there was a lot of work. There were always times when there was not enough manpower. When Hien arrived at the hall, Yunsheng had already sat down at the table and started eating. The young man was the same as yesterday. He was dressed like a peddler and was very careless. When he saw Hien, he only took a glance and then looked away. He picked up the bowl and drank the porridge. The meal was simple porridge and side dishes. With the He family's financial situation, they could not afford to eat any exquisite dishes. Even so, there was a plate of desserts on the table. They did not look very exquisite and the aroma was coarse. He Sui specially prepared them for his daughter. Hien also picked up the bowl and drank the porridge. She drank it very quickly. Qingmei and He Yunsheng were slightly surprised. In the past, Hien was picky and refused to eat properly. In the end, he would reluctantly eat a bowl of porridge and only finish it after a long time. After finishing the porridge, she didn't immediately reach for the desserts on the plate. He Sui prepared them for her. Qingmei wouldn't eat them, let alone He Yunsheng. He Yunsheng put the bowl on the table and stood up. Hien looked up and asked, "Where are you going?" He Yunsheng frowned. "What?" Just as he was about to speak impatiently, his gaze suddenly caught a glimpse of the mark on Hien's palm. His tone paused. He thought that Hien would complain to He Sui when she returned home yesterday. Who knew that everything was calm this morning? It seemed that Hien did not go to sow discord. He Sui still did not know that Hien was injured. The young man's tone softened a little. "I'm going up the mountain to chop firewood." In He Yunsheng's mind, Hien, who heard this sentence, should leave with no interest and go back to her room to fiddle with her rouge and face powder. Then, she should dress up and go out for a walk. Who knew that Hien's eyes lit up and said excitedly, "Really? I'll go too." Before He Yunsheng could speak, Qingmei spoke first. "Miss, what are you going to do? It rained on the mountain and the road is not easy to walk on. There's mud everywhere. What if you fall?" That's right. It was rare that there was a normal person in the room. He Yunsheng immediately added, "Don't look for trouble." Both of them thought that Hien was just being impulsive. Hien turned to Qingmei and said, "Father is at the martial arts field during the day and only comes home at night. Qingmei, you have so much work to do. You can't follow me all the time." He Yunsheng. She called He Yunsheng by his name, which made He Yunsheng quiver. "If you don't take me, I'll go by myself." "Hey," He Yunsheng said angrily. "Is there a third person in this room who can control me?" she asked calmly. He Yunsheng was speechless. No one in this room could control Hien's temper, let alone a third person. Because of He Sui's pampering, Hien did not listen to anyone. "Oh, except for that young master fan. If you want to go, then go with me," the young man said angrily. "But if you fall on the way and cry and want to go home, I won't send you back." Hien shrugged. He Yunsheng left angrily. He could not understand why Hien had become so annoying after being sick. Hien used to have a pretentious temper, but now Hien had a trace of rashness, which made her even more difficult to deal with. She really was He Yunqing's enemy. Longhuan Peak's mountain path was rugged and the terrain was dangerous. Most of the people who came here were poor people who chopped firewood and gathered herbs. Unknown wildflowers grew on the side of the road, which were reflected in the grass. It was very beautiful, but after all, it was not a place to go for a walk and admire the flowers. The Shirtu under his feet was stuck to the cliff. Looking down, it made his legs tremble. He Yunqing had walked this path countless times and knew that it was not easy to climb up the mountain. He waited to hear He Yan's complaints and cries, but from beginning to end, He Yan did not make a sound. He Yunqing could not help but turn his head. He was surprised to find that He Yan was not far behind him. They were almost walking shoulder to shoulder. How was this possible? Even a man would find it difficult to walk this path, not to mention He Yan was a delicate young lady. In the past, when she walked far away, she had to rub her knees. When did she have such good stamina? Why are you looking at me? He Yan stared at him strangely. Aren't you going to continue walking? He Yunqing did not say anything and turned back to continue walking. She must be faking it. She must not be able to hold on any longer. He Yan looked at her legs and sighed. The strength in her legs was really weak. After walking with He Yunqing for such a long time, she actually felt tired. It seemed that they still needed some time to break in. It's fine here. He Yunqing stopped and took the axe from his waist. There were a lot of miscellaneous trees here. He Yunqing chose small trees, which were more convenient to chop. He pointed to Shirtu next to He Yan. You can sit here for a while. I need to chop for 2 hours. Right here? He Yan nodded and took down the cloth bag she was carrying. He Yunqing stared blankly as she took out an axe from her cloth bag. You, what are you doing? He Yunqing's mind went blank and he could not speak clearly. He thought that He Yan's cloth bag contained a water bottle. Who knew that she had an axe in her bag? She carried an axe on her back and walked such a long distance. Moreover, she was not left behind by him. He Yunqing suspected that he was dreaming. What happened next made He Yunqing even more certain that he was dreaming. He saw his delicate older sister, He Yan, who usually felt that a teacup was too heavy for her, pick up the axe in front of her without hesitation. With one chop, she chopped down a bunch of branches. Her movements were so nimble that it was as if she had done it 1,000 times. She said, "Let me help you. It'll be quick." Chapter 5. He Yunqing always felt that his dream was a little too long. His sister followed him up the mountain early in the morning and chopped some firewood. Finally, she took out some snacks from her cloth bag and gave him one. He Yunqing wanted to refuse, but the sweet and greasy aroma filled the tip of his nose. He Yan had already lowered his head to bite into his own share. Unexpectedly, He Yunqing reached out and took it. He took a bite. The sweet taste was unfamiliar to him. He Sui was very biased. She gave all the delicious food to He Yan, but He Yan was not a person who liked to share. He Yan saw that he ate very slowly, so she stuffed the rest of the snacks into his hands and said, "You can have the rest. I'm full." He Yunqing did not know what to do. He and his sister were the only 2 people in the He family. He Sui was just an armed escort who came to the capital to deliver goods. On the way, he happened to be robbed by mountain bandits. He saved the young miss of the capital scholar's mansion and married happily. The scholar's family only had one young miss. He Sui did not have any parents, so he voluntarily became the son-in-law of the family. Although he was the son-in-law of the family, his son and daughter still followed their husband's surname. Later, the scholar and his wife died one after another. Madam He was depressed all day. When He Yunqing was 3 years old, Madam He passed away. The 3 of them depended on each other for survival. He Sui and his wife were deeply in love. He Yan looked very much like Madam He. Probably because of this, He Sui loved He Yan very much. Although the He family was not rich, He Sui always tried her best to satisfy He Yan's needs. Over time, He Yan also became an annoying person. At least, He Yunqing could not love this sister of his. But since she fell ill, many of her actions had become unimaginable. He Yunqing didn't know how to face her. "You go up the mountain to chop firewood every day?" He Yan asked him. "What do you do in the afternoon? Don't you go to school?" He Yunqing was only 1 year younger than He Yan. He was 15 this year. Children at this age should still be in school. When we get back, we'll make a large cake and sell it in the shed in the afternoon. Forget about the school. Hyunshing casually said, we don't have money at home, and I'm not cut out for that. I can just read a few words. Although he tried to hide it, Hye-in could still see a trace of regret and longing in the boy's eyes. After a pause, she asked, what do you want to do in the future? Why do you ask? Hyunshung was suspicious, but after a moment, he still answered Hye-in's question. Now I go to the martial arts arena every day. In the future, as long as I pass the academy examinations, I will be able to enter the city's garrison army and slowly become a lieutenant. Then I will be able to earn some silver. That's it? Hye-in laughed. I thought you would want to do something else. How can I do something else? Hyunshung mocked himself. Don't tell me I'm going to be like General Feihong. We both have the same surname, but he's much more powerful than us. Suddenly hearing his name from Hyunshung's mouth, Hye-in froze for a moment. She was silent for a moment before asking, you know General Feihong? Of course I know. Who doesn't know Dawei? That year General Feihong conquered the western Chong, General Fengyun conquered the southern barbarians, northern He and southern Shao. That's why our Dawei was at peace. Young men are chivalrous and high-spirited. If I can become a person like them, even if I die, it's worth it. Hye-in laughed out loud. Hyunshung was flustered and exasperated. What are you laughing at? But just chopping firewood and selling large cake. You can't become a person like them. That year General Feihong and General Fengyun weren't people who could be successful just by casually learning in the martial arts arena. Of course I know. Hyunshung's face turned red. But Which young man didn't want to make a name for themselves? Hyunshung was at the age where he was hot-blooded. Moreover, the current situation was really holding him back. Hye-in said, from tomorrow onwards, I'll go with you to the mountains every day to chop firewood and sell large cake. What? Hyunshung jumped up from the chair too. Hye-in, are you crazy? Today's matter could be said to be a spur-of-the-moment thing. If she came every day, Hye-in was afraid that her brain was damaged because of her illness. Without waiting for Hyunshung to speak, Hye-in had already stood up and patted the dust off her body. Since you're done eating, let's continue working. Spring waits for no one. Hyunshung, after the spring rain, it was sunny for more than 10 days. Recently, Qingmei had something on her mind. In the past, eldest miss always ordered her to do this and that. Eldest miss, who made her serve her personally, didn't look for her anymore. During the day, she went out with Hyunshung. At night, when Qingmei wanted to help Hye-in freshen up, Hye-in also sent her out. The only thing she could do was to get up in the morning to comb Hye-in's hair. Qingmei was sick at heart with worry. If this went on, would she also be kicked out of the house like those manservants who were sent away by Hisui? After all, eldest miss didn't need her anymore. Hyunshung also had a lot on his mind. For more than half a month, Hye-in went along Huan Peak with him every morning to chop firewood. Unexpectedly, she woke up earlier than him. Hye-in went up the mountain and tied a sandbag to her hands and feet. Hyunshung secretly weighed it. It was very heavy. Hye-in carried such a thing every day and went up the mountain with him to chop firewood. She didn't complain at all. It was as if she didn't know what tiredness was. However, Hyunshung saw that the delicate skin of her palms had been abraded many times. She simply wrapped a cloth around her hands. The benefits of doing this were obvious. After half a month, Hye-in walked faster than him and chopped more firewood than him. Hyunshung wondered if the sandbag was really so magical. Should he secretly tie 2 sandbags? 2 people chopping firewood was faster than 1 person chopping firewood. The extra time could be used to sell more cakes. Hye-in was a woman after all. It wasn't good for her to make a living in public. Hyunshung also reminded her, but Hye-in didn't care at all. Hyunshung felt a headache coming on. If Hisui knew that Hye-in had been with him these days, either chopping firewood in the mountains or going out to sell cakes, he would definitely whip him. Fortunately, Hisui didn't know. Not only did Hisui not know, but he was happy every day. His son and daughter, who used to quarrel endlessly, were much closer recently. They could sit at the same table and eat together. Sometimes, they would even chat. Hisui was very satisfied. He was much kinder to the new soldiers on the school field. After all, everything would prosper if the family lived in harmony. At this moment, Yin was sitting in front of the dressing table. Qingmei looked at her anxiously. Ever since Yin recovered from her illness, she didn't like to look in the mirror. She also didn't like to fiddle with her rouge and face powder. Now that she was fiddling with it again, Qingmei was a little nervous. Recently, the household's expenses were very poor. Yin wanted to buy new lipstick at this time, but she didn't have the money. Yin flipped through the face powder on the table and felt a headache coming on. These things had already been used. They couldn't be sold for money. She flipped through a few more times and found a few hairpins and jewelry. They were all made of silver and the quality was average. They were not as good as the ones she used to wear in the Su family. However, she didn't care so much now. She found all the jewelry and handed them to Qingmei. Take these to the pawn shop and pawn them. Pawn them until you die. You'll get more money. Qingmei's eyes widened. But, we're very poor now. Yin explained to her earnestly. These can't be eaten. She had to pawn the jewelry and get some money. It would be best if she could get enough money for Yunsheng to go to school. Since she had taken over Lady He's body, she should at least do something for the He family. After she took care of these things, she could do her own things with peace of mind. For example, she could settle an old debt. Chapter 6. When they went out, Yunsheng asked, "Why are you so late today? You won't be able to get a good seat later." "I have something to do," Yin said. "It's okay if you can't get a good seat. Our cakes are better." Yunsheng was speechless. He felt that talking to Yin now was like punching cotton, making it hard for him to vent his anger. Yin didn't lose her temper and was in a relaxed mood. Yunsheng didn't know if she was optimistic or stupid. At least, he hadn't seen Yin in a long time. The shed was set up on a street in the west of the city. Opposite was the capital's largest restaurant, Zueyu Court. Guests came and went, and the small business here was very good. But the shed was only so big, so they had to go there early to get a good seat. Yunsheng took out the big cake from the steamer. Denai cake was a kind of pastry. It was made of peeled and pitted raw plums, blanched with white plum and licorice soup, and then filled with honey, pine nuts, olive kernels, walnut kernels, and melon kernels. It was put into a small steamer and steamed until it was ripe. It was sour and sweet, very delicious, and not expensive. Yunsheng came to sell the big cake, and he could make money every month to support his family. The sun was warm and comfortable, and people came to buy one or two from time to time. By the time the sun turned to the east of Zueyu Court, they would probably be sold out. Yin watched Yunsheng work. Yunsheng was very capable, and it reminded her of the children in the army camp. Most of the children in the army camp were from poor families, and the young masters of rich families were not willing to let them go to war. Those poor children went to war just for a bite to eat. So before that, they did all kinds of work, and they could do anything. Although she had never been poor, she had been through it. "Hey, give me one. Isn't this Lady He?" A voice interrupted Yan's thoughts. She looked up and saw a long-faced man in front of her. His hair was combed into a shiny bun, and he had the head of a deer and the eyes of a mouse. He was dressed in white, but he was neither fish nor fowl. He raised his hand and was about to put it on Yan's shoulder, but Yin dodged to the side. The man missed and regretfully retracted his hand, saying, "Lady He, long time no see. You didn't go out much these days. So you're here to sell cakes with young Master He. How can you do this kind of thing? It's hard." His tone made it sound like they were close. Yin didn't understand and looked at Yunsheng. Yunsheng's face was filled with anger as he reprimanded, "Wang Jigue, stay away from my sister. Brat, your sister doesn't mind. You?" "Well, I bought some rouge a few days ago and wanted to give it to you. Since I happened to meet you today, I want to give it to you. I wonder if you would do me the honor of going to the Sisui River with me?" Yin wanted to laugh at a person who looked like a beggar trying to act like an elegant young master. She had met many people in her 2 lives, both good and bad, but no one dared to tease her like this. "I want to sell cakes. I may not be able to go for a walk with you." Yin tactfully declined. "You should give this rouge to someone else." Wang Jigue was stunned. He lived on the same street as the He family. Yin's father was a military officer, so others didn't dare to provoke her. But Yin wasn't a girl who knew her place, and she liked to take advantage of little things. Usually, If he gave her some rouge and powder, she would call him Brother Jiogue. Today, in front of so many people, he was slapped in the face. Wang Jiogue was embarrassed. His smile wasn't as sincere as before. Lady, he can't still be thinking about young Master Fan, right? Young Master Fan is about to get married. Why do you? Shut up. Before he could finish his words, Wang Jiogue felt a punch on his face and fell to the ground with a thud. He Yunsheng stood in front of him and pointed to the distance. Get out of here, she said angrily. The 14 or 15-year-old boy was like a half-grown calf, full of strength. Wang Jiogue had been hollowed out by wine and women. He was no match for He Yunsheng. His head hurt, his face hurt, and his whole body was flustered. He scrambled to his feet and looked at He Yin. She didn't seem to have any intention of apologizing. In fact, she seemed to be interested. Suddenly, a nameless anger surged in his heart. You. He pointed at He Yin with a trembling finger. He Yunsheng stood in front of He Yin and sneered. What's wrong with us? Wang Jiogue didn't dare to step forward. He had some doubts in his heart. The relationship between these two siblings had never been good. He Yin always complained to him. He Yunsheng also never cared about He Yan's matters. Why were these two together today? He Yunsheng even stood up for He Yin. Just you wait. He stomped his feet and ran away. The crowd dispersed, and the shed returned to its original calm. He Yunsheng put away the big cake with a gloomy face and didn't say a word. He Yin looked at him. What are you looking at? He Yunsheng asked angrily. You did a good job just now. He Yin pondered for a moment. It's just that your lower body is a little unstable. Your basic skills aren't very solid. You still need to practice your horse stance at home. Go away. He Yunsheng didn't want to talk about it. You're not a martial arts instructor. He Yin looked at He Yunsheng. He Yunsheng was a promising talent. Perhaps it was because he had worked hard since he was young and had a good foundation. Compared to the young masters of the He family, He Yunsheng was a good seedling. He shouldn't have bought the big cake here. He should have gone to a better martial arts school to learn his skills. Then let me rephrase. Who is Master Fan? He Yunsheng slammed his handkerchief on the table and glared at her. You still dare to say it. What's wrong with Master Fan? He Yin glanced at him. He Yunsheng mentioned Master Fan as if he was extremely angry. What's wrong? If he didn't provoke you first, you wouldn't have been fooled by him. That kind of young master is a womanizer. You're the only one who would believe him. He's about to get married, and you're still going on a hunger strike for him. You're dying for him, but he's still marrying someone new. You, on the other hand, have become a joke in the capital and you still mention him. Are you trying to anger me to death? With just a few words, He Yin roughly understood what was going on. Lady, he was spoiled since she was young. How could she raise a peony in a clay basin? She wholeheartedly wanted to marry into a noble family and become a noble lady. By chance, she met a young master from a noble family. The two of them secretly fell in love. However, Lady, he gave her heart to the other party, but the other party was just fooling around. A young master from a noble family would never marry the daughter of a military official. Master Fan's family had already found a suitable match for him and was about to get married. How could Lady he let it go? She personally went to ask for an explanation, but was mercilessly kicked out. She couldn't accept it and wanted to commit suicide by hunger strike. Just as she was about to die, He Yin woke up and replaced Lady He. It was no wonder that after He Yin woke up, everyone in the He family treated her with caution. They were afraid that she would accidentally commit suicide again. He Yunsheng was still talking endlessly, scolding He Yin for not being clear-headed. He didn't know that his real sister had long passed away. He Yin wrung her hands in her heart. Lady, he shouldn't have ruined her life for a liar. Life was very precious. It was a waste to give it to someone who wasn't worth it. Moreover, if she passed away like this, the person who betrayed her would still live freely, but the person who truly loved her would be in so much pain that he wished he was dead. What was the point of hurting her loved ones and making her enemies happy? Her experience was somewhat similar to Lady He's. They both had bad relationships, but she was different from Lady He. He Yuansheng, He Yuanliang, He Rufei, Su Jiheng, and He Wanru. She would personally visit them one by one and take back what they owed her. For this, she had done a lot of work. Every morning, She would walk with a sandbag tied to her body in order to regain her strength. Every afternoon, she would sell goods in the marketplace so that she could inquire about the He family and the Su family from all kinds of people. For example, the blind Madame Su had accidentally fallen into the water and drowned a few days ago. The first master of the Su family was inconsolable and bedridden. The entire He family was mourning, and the first master of the He family's hair turned white overnight. General Feihong and his sister were very close, so he personally took care of his cousin's funeral. The funeral lasted for 3 days and 3 nights, and the whole city knew about it. These half-truths flew into He Yan's ears like snowflakes, and she could only laugh it off. The truth had been covered up, and she had to uncover it. Before that, she had to live well. Chapter 7. At night, the wind came in through the cracks in the window and made the candlelight sway slightly. He Yan looked at the silver pieces in front of him and asked, "That's all? I've already asked the shopkeeper to give me more." Qing Mei said awkwardly, "But the shopkeeper said that the jewelry can only be exchanged for this much." He Yan nodded. "Then you can leave first." Qing Mei left. He Yan picked up the silver pieces one by one and put them in his palm. There were only 2 pieces in total. She felt that her heart seemed to be broken along with them. When she was in the He family, she didn't lack money. Even if she was really short of money, she could casually take some jewelry or jade pendant to exchange for some money. Later, when she was on the battlefield, she didn't need money. When she returned to the capital, the emperor's rewards filled several courtyards of the He family. She thought of the gold, silver, and jewelry bestowed to General Feihong. She could take any one of them and solve the He family's urgent needs. But she wasn't in the He family now. He Yan sighed heavily and finally understood what it meant to be a penny-stumped hero. Money was money. There was one more thing. She also wanted to go to the drill ground. Going up the mountain to chop firewood every day could certainly strengthen her body, but it only increased her physical strength. If she wanted to recover her strength, the fastest way was to go to the drill ground and fight with others, shooting arrows and riding horses. But she didn't know if He Sui, who loved his daughter very much, would agree. She blew out the candle and went to bed. No matter what, everything could wait until tomorrow. The next day, after chopping firewood and going down the mountain, He Yunsheng had lunch and went to sell cakes. He Yan looked at his big basket full of cakes and asked, "You made so many cakes. Can you sell them all?" "The weather is hot. There are a lot of people coming to buy cakes." He Yunsheng said, "After a few days, it's time to sell other cakes." He Yunsheng was really worried about this family. He was very clear about these business matters. He Yan was in awe and patted his shoulder. "Then let's go." He Yunsheng's body stiffened. He Yan's action was really very manly. When they arrived at the shack, there weren't many peddlers because they had arrived early. The two of them found a good spot near the street. He took out the big cake. It was the beginning of April. When the sun came out in the afternoon, it felt like summer. The large cake was sweet and sour, and also had the fragrance of plums. It was the perfect time to buy it as a snack. As He Yunsheng expected, business was good. He Yunsheng picked up the cakes, and He Yan collected the money. While the two of them were busy, they suddenly saw a group of people aggressively rushing towards their position. The leader was Wang Jiugue from yesterday. Pa. Wang Jiugue slammed both of his hands on the table. The surrounding people hurriedly retreated, unwilling to be implicated in this disaster. He Yunsheng was fearless and said angrily, "What are you doing?" "What are you doing?" Wang Jiugue coldly snorted. "You hit me yesterday. Do you think I can just let it go?" He Yunsheng rolled up his sleeves and said coldly, "You want to fight? I'll accompany you." "Good boy. You have guts." Wang Jiugue took a step back, and the minions behind him surrounded He Yunsheng. "Young man, I advise you not to be too arrogant." He Yunsheng was unmoved. At this moment, He Yan said, "Stop." He Yunsheng and Wang Jiugue looked at He Yan together. When Wang Jiugue saw He Yan, he laughed again and said, "This boy is not sensible, but he is your younger brother. I still have to give face to Lady He. If Lady He is willing to accompany me for a walk, I will let this matter go. I am a magnanimous person and won't bicker with a child. I think you can't spit out ivory from a dog's mouth." He Yunsheng was furious. "Wait." He Yan grabbed He Yunsheng's hand. He Yunsheng wanted to break free, but no matter how hard he tried, He Yan's hand firmly clamped down on him. He Yunsheng couldn't help but be stunned. When did He Yan's strength become so strong? If you have something to say, don't say it here. You will scare the people around. He Yan said indifferently, let's go over there and talk. She pointed to a small alley in the distance. No. Okay. He Yunsheng and Wang Jiugui spoke together. He Yunsheng said anxiously, you are a girl. How can you and them? These people are not good people. Wang Jiugui laughed. It seems that Lady He is sensible. Let's go. I also brought a gift for Lady He today. He Yunsheng still wanted to make trouble. He Yin leaned close to his ear and whispered, do you think that I chopped firewood with you in the mountains for nothing? Don't worry, it will be fine. Just for the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. The girl's voice was soft and gentle, with a trace of inexplicable laughter. He Yunsheng couldn't help but be stunned. When he came back to his senses, He Yin had already walked away with Wang Jiugui and the others. He Yunsheng wanted to chase after them, but when he thought of what He Yin said to him, he stopped himself. He would trust her this time. The time it takes to brew a cup of tea. If she didn't come back in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, he would go and find her. On the other side, He Yin and Wang Jiugui walked into the small alley. Above the small alley was the wine shop of Zueyu House. They could faintly hear the melodious sound of the zither inside. He Yin had been looking forward to this place for a long time, but she had never been there. Not long after she returned to the capital, He Rufei came back. She was dressed as a girl, so she couldn't enter this kind of place. Younger sister He, Wang Jiugui grinned and leaned forward. What do you want to talk to me about? My younger brother. You're talking about young master He. Wang Jiugui was slightly surprised, but he quickly smiled and waved his hand magnanimously. I won't lower myself to his level, you know that? He took out a round powder box the color of a duck's egg from his bosom, and touched He Yan's face with his other hand. I have you in my heart, from now on, we are a family. Before Wang Jiugui could finish his words, they were replaced by a scream. In Zueyu House, the zither string trembled slightly because of this scream. A wrong note was plucked, like a scratch on a beautiful jade, abrupt and regretful. Someone asked in confusion, what's that sound? A corner of the muslin curtain was lifted by the handle of the fan. The teacup was exquisite, but it was not as slender as the fingers holding the tea. He Yin let go of his hand, and Wang Jiugui's arm hung limply, his face full of horror. He Yin smiled faintly, raised his hand, and the box of powder box smashed towards Wang Jiugui's head, smashing white foam on his face. Thank you for your gift, but I don't like this kind of inferior powder. Remember, don't give me this kind of thing in the future. Slut. Hit him. Wang Jiugui wailed, but didn't forget to give the order. When the young girl heard this, it was as if she had heard a joke. Her eyes curved, and her laughter was as clear as a mountain spring. She was really happy. The spring breeze blew up the corner of her skirt, her black hair, snow-white skin, almond-shaped eyes were bright and benevolent. She was like a dainty young lady walking on the blue road. But the words she said were terrifying. She rubbed her wrist and said with a smile, you better not regret it. Chapter 8. Wang Jiugui felt that he must be dreaming. He pinched his thigh hard and immediately cried out in pain, ouch! It didn't seem like a dream, but if it wasn't a dream, how could he explain what was happening in front of him? In just a moment, his lackeys were all lying on the ground. The culprit had one foot on the stone steps and was brushing the dust off her clothes. Feeling Wang Jiugui's gaze, she looked over. Her eyes were clear and bright, making Wang Jiugui's hair stand. He had never seen He Yin like this. He Yin wasn't like this. He Yin was beautiful, mean, greedy, vain, and liked to take advantage of others. There were countless women like this in Shuo City. Most of them were arrogant, but their lives were thin. The good ones could become concubines in rich families. The bad ones would marry an ordinary person and live a sad life. He Sui raised her like a young lady. He Yin had never touched any sharp weapons in her life. Her hands were either playing the zither or painting. At least, they weren't used to hit people. But just now, Wang Jiugui saw her hands clenched into fists and punched the man beside him to the ground. He still remembered that He Yin had just grabbed his arm. Before his body could go numb, he felt pain in his arm and screamed. How were those fingers? They were sharper than an axe. This woman was too scary. What kind of medicine did she eat? She became so strong overnight. She could defeat more than 10 people by herself? Wang Jugui wanted to cry. He hadn't thought about how to beg for mercy when he saw the girl walking towards him. Grandaunt, please spare me. His rationality disappeared at this moment. Wang Jugui blurted out, I didn't recognize Mount Tai. Please be magnanimous and let me go. Don't give me this kind of gift in the future. He Yin said gently, I don't like it. Okay. Wang Jugui said okay several times. Afraid that He Yin didn't believe him, he added, tell me what you like. I'll buy it for you. Is that okay? That won't be necessary. I won't accept a reward if it's not deserved. He Yin laughed. We're all neighbors. Don't make such jokes in the future. Yes. Wang Jugui was moved to tears. But I have something to ask you, she said. A moment later, He Yin left a mess on the ground and left in a relaxed manner, leaving behind groans and groans. She walked briskly and did not know that after she left, on a certain floor of the drunken Jade Tower, someone released the hand holding the fan, and the gauze curtain covered the mess downstairs. When did the women in the capital become so fierce and fierce? This was a brisk voice that was filled with laughter and ridicule. Could this be the reason why Uncle is still unwilling to get married? His words were not answered. The man continued, Uncle, why don't we ask around and find out which family that young lady was from? If she's not bad, why don't you take her in as one of your female guards? At night, you can… Bang! Someone's fingertips lightly tapped the table, and the tea lid on the half-cup accurately flew into his mouth with a whoosh, leaving him speechless. Woo-woo, woo-woo. The man was unwilling to give up and made threatening gestures. If you say one more word of nonsense, I'll throw you down from here. A lazy and indifferent voice interrupted the other's complaints. The room quieted down. The plucked strings of flowing light slowly flowed through the elegant room, covering the spring scenery outside the window. The tea continued to be drunk. Someone muttered, stingy. But it was quickly drowned out by the sound of the zither. He Yunsheng saw that He Yin came back safe and sound and was relieved. Are you okay? Where are Wang Jugui and the others? He Yunsheng didn't see Wang Jugui's figure and asked. I tried to reason with them and moved them emotionally, and they left. They also said that they will come another day to apologize and won't do such a thing in the future. He Yin said, don't worry about them, just continue to sell cakes. He Yunsheng looked at her suspiciously. If Wang Jugui was really so reasonable, he wouldn't be called Wang Jugui. But He Yin didn't look like she wanted to say more, and she didn't look like she was hurt. He Yunsheng was a young man, so he quickly put this matter to the back of his mind. At night, after dinner, He Yunsheng wanted to go to bed, but He Yin stopped him. What's the matter? Do you have clean clothes? He Yin asked. He Yunsheng didn't understand. I want to see if there's anything on your clothes that needs to be mended. He Yin said, I can help to mend it at night. He Yunsheng's expression was about to crack. Ever since he was born, this was the first time He Yin had asked to mend his clothes. For a moment, the young man's heart was filled with a strange feeling. But, he asked hesitantly, have you done needlework before? He seemed to remember that He Yin didn't know how to sew, and Qingmei did all the needlework. You're underestimating me. Of course not. He Yin gave him a push. Hurry up and get it. Bring whatever you can get. He Yunsheng obediently found a pile of clothes. He Yin picked up the clothes and walked into the house. He Yunsheng was still a little hesitant. Why don't I ask Qingmei to do it? Qingmei's work is not as good as mine. Go to sleep. You have to wake up early tomorrow, He Yin said. After sending the young man away, He Yin returned to the house and looked around. Finally, she found a maroon round-necked, narrow-sleeved long robe. He Sui probably gave all his money to his daughter. He Yunsheng didn't even have a decent piece of clothing. He only had some cotton clothes, and this long robe was probably the leftovers of other people. The color of the washed clothes was old. Fortunately, she was about the same height as He Yunsheng, so the long robe barely fit her. Then, she tied her hair into a man's bun and stuck a tree branch outside the door. She made her skin darker and her eyebrows thicker. Dian looked at the mirror. She looked like a young man. In her previous life, she was very good at dressing up as a man. At least during those years, no one noticed anything wrong. In this life, she didn't feel awkward dressing up as a man. Unfortunately, she wanted to be an elegant young master, but when she wore this robe, she looked like a young master from a declining family. It was barely pleasing to the eye. She paced back and forth in the house. When she was sure that nothing would go wrong, she secretly opened the door and walked to the courtyard. She nimbly jumped over the wall and came to the street. At this time of the year, there was no curfew in the capital. It was a lively and bustling time. Dian walked along the brightly lit street. The boats along the shore sang and danced pleasantly. The hawkers on both sides of the street shouted loudly. Spring was full of life. It was a prosperous night. She hadn't been able to go out like this for many years. Hirufe had returned to the He family. Dian had married into the Su family. Dian had lost her sight. These lively, bustling, and beautiful things seemed to be very far away from her. But tonight, with the night breeze blowing from the lake, she regained what she had lost. She was free. She was free from the He family and had to start all over again. She was grateful to the heavens. The capital was not far from the Drunken Jade House. Outside the Ming House, beautiful girls were welcoming guests with smiles on their faces. This was not a brothel, but the capital's largest and most famous gambling house, Lu Tong House. Dian stopped in front of Lu Tong House. Chapter 9. At the entrance of Lu Tong Zhuang, a woman wearing a flower hairpin stopped Dian and said, "Gongzi, this is a gambling house." "I know." Dian nodded and took out a piece of silver from his sleeve. He waved it in front of her and said, "I'm here to gamble." The woman was stunned. Before she could say anything, Dian had already walked in. The woman standing outside the gambling house was a gambling prostitute. The people who came to Lu Tong Zhuang were all from wealthy families. Silver was worthless, so they learned to treat people differently. Those who didn't look very rich would persuade people to leave. First of all, it wasn't very nice for poor people to walk inside. They would dirty the embroidered carpet. Second of all, the poor people cared about money and couldn't afford to lose. Once they lost, they would cry to the heavens and earth and refuse to pay. They would disturb the noble's mood and lose more than they gain. Dian's clothes were old and washed. He definitely didn't look like a young master from a wealthy family. Unfortunately, the gambling prostitute didn't have time to stop her. She had already entered uninvited. The gambling house was full of people. Everyone's face was red. Those who won were naturally complacent. Those who lost were unreconciled. They took out a stack of banknotes and shouted, "Again!" Dian walked and looked around. It turned out that the rumors about gambling houses and brothels were true. Today, after she taught Wang Jugui a lesson, she asked Wang Jugui a question. She asked him which was the biggest gambling house in the capital. Wang Jugui, a street punk, must know. Sure enough, Wang Jugui told her about Lu Tong Zhuang. Dian had never been to a gambling house. Before she joined the Fuyue army, because of her special identity, she couldn't go to places with more people, let alone a gambling house. When she joined the Fuyue army and returned to the capital after winning the war, He Yunshang came back. She became the demissy of the second branch of the He family. She couldn't go to this kind of place. Therefore, this was the first time she didn't even know where the gambling house was. Lu Tong Zhuang, on the other hand, had everything. Pai Gao, danqi, Chinese chess, grass fighting, cockfighting. She was dazzled by the sight. While she was amazed, she also felt that it was a pity that she did not know how to do any of these. Some people were guessing the dice. They put the dice in a bowl and guessed the number. This was the simplest game, and it also attracted the most people. Dian's eyes were dazzled by the flowing silver. The corners of Dian's mouth finally broke into a smile. The He family was really too poor, but He Yunsheng still had to attend a school or martial arts school. Pawn jewelry couldn't be exchanged for much money, and it was still far from being enough to buy a bundle. Even if he wanted to make a big cake and sell it, it would take a long time to save up. After thinking about it, Dian could only think of going to the gambling house. Although it was opportunistic, he could not care so much at the moment. "Hey, brother, why are you standing here?" Don't stand here if you don't want to gamble. The people around Yin shoved him with disdain in their eyes. If you don't have money, why did you come to a casino? Can't you just buy some nice clothes? It was really unappetizing. Yin said, let's gamble. The people around were all wearing gold and silver. They were either rich or noble. When they suddenly saw a young man in poor clothes, they couldn't help but look over. Yin took out the only 2 pieces of silver from his sleeve and put them on the table. Someone mocked, boy, you should think clearly. This is not a joke. I see that you don't have any other silver on you. Why don't you stop gambling? If you really lose and cry, others won't return the silver to you. It wasn't that such a thing didn't happen. Gambling was addictive. The more one lost, the more one gambled. Some people lost all their land deeds, wives, and children. In the end, they regretted it and were kicked out by the people of Lu Tong village. This happened from time to time. They looked at Yin with pity. The poor people in Lu Tong village had no way out. Yin smiled. It's okay. I'm just gambling for fun. Everyone burst into laughter, but no one knew whether they were laughing out of goodwill or just for fun. The dice were put into the bowl and turned upside down. The dealer shook the dice left and right. The dice made a crisp sound. It was accompanied by the lively voices of the people. It was like music. He could vaguely hear the rough men talking and laughing loudly. Yin remembered those years in the barracks. When she entered the barracks, from a soldier to a deputy general, from a deputy general to a general, she didn't have any relationship with the He family. She relied on her own flesh and blood to earn her position. There was no other entertainment in the cold and bitter border. Those men in the barracks couldn't hold it in and secretly gambled. Yin would punish them every time he saw them. He couldn't stop them from gambling in private. Yin was also helpless. In the end, he could only rule that they couldn't gamble with silver. They could gamble with other things like a drumstick, a piece of dry food, or a piece of fur. They didn't really want to gamble, but they were really bored. Yin couldn't bear to deprive them of their only pleasure other than training and fighting. They let Yin play with them. Sometimes, Yin would join them for 1 or 2 rounds when he was in the mood. Every time, he lost badly. She lost almost all of her trinkets, but she wasn't angry. She just felt that there were specializations in this field. Not everyone knew how to gamble. The crisp sound of the dice stopped abruptly. The dealer put down the bowl and looked at her. Big, Yin said. Open. The bowl was opened. 2 dice lay quietly on the table. Everyone held their breath and looked over. The 2 dice, 1 5 and 1 6, were indeed big. Everyone was a little surprised. After a moment, the man who laughed at Yin laughed. You're lucky. Take this money and get some good clothes. Some scattered silver and banknotes were piled up in front of Yin. Yin pushed the silver out again. Everyone looked at her. Again, she said with a smile. Someone couldn't help but say, hey, this kid is a little arrogant. Brother, you'd better quit while you're ahead. It's good enough that you won. This was a kind advice. Do you really think you'll always be so lucky? Ha ha ha. Children are so naive. Sounds of mockery, persuasion, and chatter filled his ears. Yin only had eyes for the 2 dice among the multitudes of people. Yunqing needed to attend school and become a military officer. Qingmei couldn't finish all the chores, so the He family should hire more servants. It would be summer in a few months, and the rainy season would come. Some of the tiles on the He family's door were missing, so it would definitely leak. Both inside and outside, they needed silver. She wanted to find out about Su Jiheng and He Rufei, so she couldn't do without silver. She didn't need a lot of silver, but she definitely couldn't do without it. Otherwise, when she couldn't move an inch, she would know that life was difficult. Have you thought it through? The middle-aged man who shook the dice stroked his beard and smiled kindly. Yin returned a polite smile. Again. Chapter 10. Money was piled up on the table, and some people stacked their jade pendants on top of them. A young and inexperienced boy who had good luck after good fortune naturally attracted the attention of others. Not long after, the place was filled with people who wanted to watch the fun. Big. Open. Gongzi, please choose. Small. Again. Open. Again. Open. Again. Open. In front of Yin, there was a pile of banknotes. The people who laughed at her just now had already quieted down. Even a fool could see that she was not a newbie who came to play for the first time. If it wasn't for the reputation of Lu Tongzhuang, others would have suspected that she was working together with the banker to deceive outsiders. The faint sound of the night watch came from outside. Tian said, "It's getting late. I should go back." Gongzi, the bearded old man, smiled. "Let's play one last round. How about we change the bet?" Tian looked up at him. "How do we play?" "Let's not play big or small. I think Gongzi is an expert. How about we guess the number of the dice?" He pushed all the jewelry and banknotes on the table to the middle of the table. "If Gongzi wins, these will all be Gongzi's." Tian looked at the banknotes on the table. She had already won a lot, and she knew that this would attract other people's attention. In the past, when she was in the army, she had heard the young generals talk about the dark side of casinos, so she knew a thing or two about it. She should have stopped when she was ahead, but for some reason, He Yunxing's yearning gaze when he talked about going to school appeared in her mind, as well as the one and only clothes she was wearing, which had been washed out. "Okay," she said. The crowd was in an uproar, and the atmosphere suddenly became tense. Guessing big or small and guessing numbers were two completely different things. Guessing big or small depended on luck. There were only two outcomes, big or small. But the number had to be accurate to every single one. If it was wrong, it was wrong. The chance of winning was too small. Unless it was someone who really knew how to throw dice, they probably wouldn't do it like this. Moreover, the banker's method was different. Tian also pushed all the banknotes in front of him forward. If she lost this round, everything she had done tonight would have been for naught. If he won, He Yunxing's tuition would be enough for the He family's food and drink for the next 3 to 5 years. When the crowd saw this, they all raised their stakes. "Me too. This is my silver. I bet on this brother to win." "How is that possible?" "I'll bet on my opponent, huh?" The higher the stakes, the more people would watch. Getting rich overnight was even more irresistible than the best opera troupe in the capital. The long-bearded old man slowly lifted the bowl, and the casino quieted down. It seemed that only the sound of the dice colliding in the copper bowl could be heard. Tian was slightly distracted. Her gambling skills were really terrible. At least before she returned to the capital, before she married into the Su family, it was as bad as before. Not long after she got married, she played the leaf card game with other madams at various banquets as young Mistress Su. She always lost miserably. At that time, Su Zhiheng always laughed and said, "Yua, why are you so stupid?" That was a rare moment when he showed her mischievous side. She thought that she caught this handsome man's gentleness and intimacy. She was very happy and secretly made a decision to learn her skills well so that she could make Su Zhiheng proud at the next banquet. Unfortunately, before she could seriously learn the leaf card game, she became blind. Whether it was a family banquet or an external banquet, the Su family couldn't let a blind person represent the main branch. She didn't go out anymore, but the food was really boring and stuffy. She couldn't see, so she could only learn to listen. She wanted to be a blind person who could move freely. Even if she couldn't see, she didn't need other people's help. She had always been competitive, so she started practicing again. First, she listened to the sounds and learned to distinguish shapes. Then, she slowly moved. When she was almost ready, she could use the branches in the fu as swords and secretly make gestures. It was at that time that she learned to listen to the sounds of the dice. Tian felt that the dice were much simpler than the leaf card game. The more delicate something was, the more it tested one's hearing ability. She listened like this, and each side of the dice had a slight difference. She shook the dice in the bamboo tube and poured it on the table. She silently recited the numbers and then used her fingers to test it. At first, she always made mistakes. Once, after she finished reciting the numbers and touched the dice, she finally smiled. She succeeded. The Su family's servants secretly talked about her. They said that after the young mistress became blind, she went crazy and shook the bamboo tube in the room all day long. However, they gradually discovered that He Yin didn't need anyone's help. She could still eat, live, and travel. She could accurately distinguish each Su family servant by their voices and knew where each utensil was placed. If she didn't know that she really couldn't see, she would be no different from a normal person. Su Zhiheng praised her for being amazing. He held her hand and praised her. Yin was very happy, but also a bit disappointed. She didn't know what she was disappointed about, but she always felt that perhaps it shouldn't be like this. Now that she thought about it, at that time, her hearing ability had been trained to perfection. She could probably hear Su Jiheng's coldness and perfunctory tone when he spoke to her. However, her emotions made her subconsciously avoid this thought. Yin lowered her eyes. In the end, the person involved couldn't see clearly. The sound of shaking the dice came to an abrupt end. With a bang, the bowl was upside down on the table. 1 dice, 2 dice, both of them landed. Everyone looked at Yin. Yin closed her eyes. It was as if she had returned to the days when she was in the Su family. She sat in front of the table, shaking the dice alone. She opened the lid alone. She touched each side of the dice alone. She tried to grasp the light in the darkness. 2, 5. She opened her eyes and said, the upside-down bowl and chopsticks were opened, and the 2 dice fell naked in front of everyone's eyes. At first, it was quiet. After a while, someone softly cried out in surprise. Then, one after another, cries of surprise rose and fell. Yin was closest to a pampered young master. He grabbed Yin's arm and shouted, "Master, from today onwards, you are my master. Please accept a bow from your disciple." Yin helplessly pulled away the young master's hand that was grabbing her arm. The long-bearded old man's smile stiffened. However, after a moment, he stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Young master, you have good skills. These silvers are all yours." After a pause, he said, "May I ask young master's esteemed name? Would you do me the honor of drinking a cup of tea with this old man before you leave?" Yin put all the silver notes and jewelry into her bosom and politely declined. "Nameless brat, there's no need to mention it. It's really late today. As for the tea, I'll drink it another day." After she finished speaking, she walked past everyone and quickly left Lu Tong Manor. The people in the gambling house continued to marvel at the gambling house. The long-bearded old man's smile didn't change. He turned around and walked upstairs. Someone bowed their head in front of him. He said, "Follow him." On the other side, the big man with a gloomy face pressed his fingers together and waved to Dingyi behind him. He then followed him out of Lu Tong Manor. "You want to run away after winning my money? There's no such thing in this world, idiot." Chapter 11. The night was dark and no one could be seen in the alleyway. Occasionally, a wild cat would jump by and its soft meows would fill the capital's spring night. The young man clutched the bulging things in his arms and walked through the alleyway like a ghost. An ordinary man's wealth is his own ruin. She won so much money in Lu Tong Manor, so it was inevitable that she would annoy others. If she was followed on the main road and exposed, the He family would suffer more losses than gains. She didn't want to cause trouble for the He family. However, the more afraid something was, the more it would happen. Yin stopped. At the end of the alleyway was the street facing the road. Because it was not as lively as Lu Tong Manor, there were many small shops and taverns. At this moment, the doors were already closed. It was dark and there was no one. Only the moon and stars fell on the ground, illuminating a little bit of light. Yin turned his head and squatted down to pick up a few stones. After pondering for a moment, he suddenly turned his head and threw them. The stones were fast and sharp, like the arrowhead of an arrow. With a few puff 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 sounds, someone fell down from the darkness. "Don't follow me," Yin said. "You can't catch up with me. What if you add us?" Another voice sounded. Several people walked out from the other end of the alleyway. The burly man in the lead was bare-chested. His palm looked like it could break Yin's neck. "Stinky brat, it seems that you have a lot of enemies." The burly man laughed. "Didn't anyone teach you not to attract too much attention when you go to a casino for the first time?" Yin gathered the money in his arms and calmly replied, "Since it's my first time in a casino, naturally no one taught me." But in his heart, he thought that the people in this casino were really like what the brothers in the tent said. They were not good people. They could even break the rules they set. "You still dare to be stubborn when you're about to die." The burly man flew into a rage. "Today, I will teach you how to be a person. I will twist your arm off and make you kneel and call me grandfather." Yin stood in the alleyway. In front of him was the burly man and his servant, and behind him were unknown people. There was no way to escape, but she didn't even have a weapon. Then let's see if you have the ability. She slowly clenched her fists. Arrogant. The burly man waved his hand, and the ding-e from the surrounding families rushed forward. He himself also rushed forward, but he did not use any technique. He raised his hand and chopped toward He Yan's back. Under the moonlight, the young man lowered his body and nimbly dodged the attack. He only saw a blur in front of his eyes before he felt a heavy punch on his back. This was like adding oil to the fire. He roared furiously. When he looked at the young man again, he had already jumped onto the wall of the alley. Catch him. He Yan's stalker seemed to have understood what was going on. Someone grabbed He Yan's clothes and pulled her down. Rip. The hem of his long gown was torn open by someone. Aya. She sighed. It's broken. You're still in the mood to worry about your clothes? The burly man was so angry that his nose was crooked. He was even more furious. I'll beat you to death today. He rushed toward He Yan. This man was as big as a small mountain. When he moved, he seemed to feel the ground shaking. In addition, he had many servants. If he wanted to teach this young man a lesson, it would be easy. But today, he kicked an iron plate for the first time. This young man looked young, but for some reason, he was like a loach. He was slippery, and no one could catch him. He shuttled back and forth in this group of people. He didn't attack much, but every time he hit a vital point. Not long after, the servants and guards were beaten to the ground. He Yan dodged the burly man's punch. She turned around and kicked the man's abdomen. Unfortunately, her movement was a little crooked. The burly man screamed in a moment. Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. She was a little guilty. After all, this body and her skills were not well coordinated. She couldn't hit the target with her punches. The burly man covered his lower body and fell to the ground moaning. That sound in the night made people's hair stand on end, but also sad. He Yan bent down to pick up the silver on the ground. She worked hard for the whole night and even fought a fight. It wasn't easy to earn the silver, so she couldn't let others take advantage of it. The moonlight fell on the ground. The ground was full of silver and jewelry. The young man bent down to pick them up. It was like a scene in a fairy tale where a scholar accidentally stumbled into a fairyland and accidentally saw treasures everywhere. He couldn't help but take them for himself. He Yan thought of this and found it funny. She laughed. She picked up the silver and looked at the people who were groaning on the ground. She was about to run away when she suddenly heard a gentle voice. Little brother, you dropped your silver. He Yan looked back. She saw a young man standing at the door of the pub with the lights out. He was wearing an indigo wide-sleeved robe. The robe swayed in the wind, making his figure look even thinner. His fine black hair was tied up with a blue jade crown. He had long eyebrows and thin eyes. He looked extremely gentle and refined, like a fairy. He had a smile on his face as he took a step forward. There was a piece of silver in his palm. He Yan must have dropped it during the battle just now. She had already sensed that there was someone else in the pub. However, the other person was here from the beginning. He didn't come out and didn't want to participate in the fight. He was probably just a passerby, so she didn't care. She didn't expect to see this person at this moment. He Yan had seen many men. In her previous life, she had interacted with men as a man. Most of the men she met were brave men like the burly man tonight. They couldn't be considered handsome, let alone beautiful. Su Jiheng was handsome and elegant. He was one of the good-looking men she had met. However, compared to the man in front of her, he seemed to be inferior. She was just thinking that when she went to pick up the silver, it was like a story in a fairy tale. Now it seemed even more like it. A poor young man met a real immortal and was shocked by the immortal's appearance. Was the immortal going to give the young man pointers? The closer she got, the more she felt that the man was like the immortal in the murals. The immortal saw that she didn't speak, so he reminded her, "Little brother?" He Yan came back to her senses. She took the piece of silver that she almost threw away from the man's hand and said with a smile, "Thank you." The man smiled again. "You're welcome." He Yan turned and left without looking back. She walked very fast, like a wild cat skimming over the wall. In a few moments, she disappeared. No one could catch up with her. In the night, another person came out and walked to the side of the man in blue. He whispered, "Fourth young master, that young man. He should be passing by. Don't worry about him." The immortal smiled. He seemed to think of something funny and his smile widened. "He's quite clever." Chapter 12. He Yin took the money and returned home. Qingmei didn't notice that He Yin was fumbling for the small box of rouge and face powder on the table. He poured everything inside and threw the silver and jewelry he won tonight into the box. Then, he groped around in the dark and went to bed. She was probably in a good mood after winning the money. She also solved her worries. That night, she slept very soundly. In her dream, she was gambling with her brothers in the tent. The men in the army shouted at the top of their lungs, "Open! Open!" He Yin looked embarrassed. Someone laughed, "General, why did you lose again? Did the general win once tonight?" The deputy general pretended to shake his head. "Aya, the general is not good in this aspect." "Get lost. What do you mean by not good or not good? Haven't you heard of the saying that if you are frustrated in love, you will be successful in gambling? The general is frustrated in gambling, but he is invincible in love. What does an old bachelor like you know?" Ian heard this and laughed. She laughed and laughed. Then, she felt someone pushing her. She opened her eyes and saw Qingmei's face. "Miss, what good dream did you have? Why are you laughing so happily?" The sunlight had already reached the windowsill, and the room was bright. She stretched out the back of her hand to block the dazzling light. She was a little surprised that she woke up late. Sure enough, it was a good night's sleep in spring. She thought of the dream last night and couldn't help but sigh. The men in the past said that her gambling skills were bad, so she was successful in love. They were completely wrong. However, in a way, they were right. Now that she was able to kill everyone in Lutong Manor, she was successful in gambling, but she was naturally unsuccessful in love. That was why she was defeated so badly. He Yunqing's unhappy voice came from outside the door. "He Yin, it's already late in the morning. Are you still going today?" From the beginning, she strongly opposed to He Yan's request. Now, she was used to chopping firewood with him. He Yunqing didn't understand how he and He Yin ended up in this situation. "Wait for me." He Yin quickly changed into a clean set of clothes. Qingmei went out with the basin. He Yunqing walked in and said, "Why are you so slow today?" "He Yin? What's the matter?" He Yin was tying a sandbag. When he looked up, he saw He Yunqing's angry expression. Puzzled, she asked, "What's wrong?" He Yunqing pointed at the chair. "What's wrong? Why don't you take a look?" The young man's tone was filled with anger. If there was a fire on his head, it would have ignited the entire house. He Yin looked in the direction of his finger. On the chair was the maroon gown that He Yin had borrowed from He Yunqing last night. After she returned to her room, she casually took off her clothes and threw them on the chair. She hadn't remembered this since she woke up in the morning. Before He Yin could react, He Yunqing stepped forward and shook off the gown. The long robe had been crumpled into a ball by He Yin and was stained with dirt. Now that it was shaken like this, it revealed a tear in the middle of the robe. It was as if someone had cut it in the middle of the robe. It was very miserable. "This is the gown that you mended for me?" He Yunqing was burning with anger. Last night, he was touched and thought that this sister really cared for her younger brother. Now, she was really sent by the heavens to punish him. "This is a misunderstanding. I can explain." He Yin tried to calm the child down. "Explain? How can you explain? Do you know?" He Yunqing was originally very angry and reproachful, but when he reached this point, his voice suddenly choked up and his eyes turned red. He said, "This is my only robe. If you cut it to pieces, what will I do?" He Yin had a big headache. She was really afraid of seeing people cry, especially this aggressive young man who was like a little calf. Suddenly, he felt wronged and shed tears. He Yunqing also felt wronged. Young people all cared about their reputation. As long as he was filial and indomitable, he was a good man. Although that was the case, everyone had vanity. This maroon gown had been given to him by one of his older brothers, and he had been wearing it for many years, simply because his own clothes were all short shirts and trousers, which were convenient for working, so this gown, no matter what, always looked like a young master. He Yan's clothes couldn't be compared to the clothes of the young ladies of big families, but every year, She would buy 1 or 2 pieces of fashionable clothes. He Sui spoiled her, so He Yunsheng couldn't say anything. Girls love to be beautiful. How could a man care about these worldly things? But at this moment, He Yunsheng suddenly felt wronged. He stammered, this gown is ruined. We'll buy another one. We'll find the most famous tailor in the capital to make a brand new one for you. The kind with embroidered patterns? The material must also be good. Don't cry. I didn't do it on purpose. Okay? Yunsheng? He Yin had never coaxed him with such kind words. He didn't know why, but He Yunsheng's anger suddenly dissipated. But he still had some resentment. We don't have money. Who said so? He Yin opened the makeup box and showed it to him. We have money? He Yunsheng originally just took a casual glance. But when he looked closely, he was stunned and said, Where did you get the money? Huh. The next moment, He Yunsheng suddenly rushed forward and said in surprise, Your face. Face? He Yin was shocked. He thought to himself, could it be that the face could change? It can't be. Before she went home last night, she washed her face in the water tank at the door. She should have washed off all the makeup. Just as she rushed in front of the mirror, she heard He Yunsheng's angry voice ring out beside her. Who hit you? In the mirror, the girl's features were elegant and pretty. Her pair of watery eyes were full of autumn waves. There was no change. But He Yan's gaze moved downwards. The girl's lips had an additional shallow bruise. It was especially conspicuous on her white and tender skin. Just now, when Qingmei woke her up, she used her hand to block the sun. Qingmei didn't see it. But now, He Yunsheng saw it. Lady He's delicate skin couldn't withstand any damage. She seemed to have been punched by someone last night, but it didn't hurt or itch. So, she didn't take it to heart. She didn't expect that her face would be marked today. He Yunsheng was still asking, What happened to you? These silvers, these clothes? He was suddenly frightened and his eyes were sad. You? Seeing that the boy was getting more and more unreasonable, He Yin gently knocked his head. What are you thinking? Last night, I wore your clothes and went to the casino. I gambled for 2 rounds and won some silvers. Some people came looking for trouble, so I taught them a lesson. I was careless and got hurt. It's okay. It will disappear tomorrow. She said it casually, but she didn't know how much her words shocked the boy in front of her. He Yin went to the casino? He Yin went to the casino and won money? After He Yin won the money, someone came looking for trouble and even taught the other party a lesson? No matter which one it was, He Yunsheng couldn't accept it. He even suspected that his sister had been switched. How could these things be so unimaginable? Yes, He Yin calmly explained. Because we were too poor. I wanted to go to the casino to try my luck. Who knew that my luck was so good? It was probably God's blessing. I was very afraid of those people who came looking for trouble, but recently, I went to the mountains to chop firewood with you. My strength increased a lot, so I was lucky to beat them. Seeing that He Yunsheng was still stunned, He Yin continued, If you don't believe me, you can go to Lu Tong village and ask around. Last night, a boy wearing a maroon robe won a lot of money. I'm not lying to you. He Yunsheng's mind was a mess. Seeing that He Yin was full of confidence, it seemed that what she said was true. But, oh, that's right, He Yin smiled. Since we have money now, from today onwards, we won't sell deny cakes anymore. Then what will we do? He Yunsheng murmured. Naturally, we'll go to the school. Do you want to go to school, Yunsheng? She asked. Chapter 13. He Yunsheng's mind was still thinking about what He Yin had said just now when he stepped out of the door. Do you want to go to school, Yunsheng? Of course, he wanted to. There were teachers in school and teachers in martial arts. He could study with other youths of the same age. When the time came, whether it was the imperial examination or the military examination, he would be able to rely on himself to find a future. It was not like what he was doing now, where he was just randomly cultivating his qi. It was really terrible. In the past, his family did not have money. But now, they had money. He Yunsheng's suppressed desire was gradually born again. He sneaked a glance at the young girl walking beside him. He Yin. Ever since He Yin recovered from her illness, it seemed that everything in the family had improved. It was no longer like a pool of stagnant water. He did not know when, but this pool of water was swept by the wind and rippled. So the old air was swept away, and the flowers were red and the willows were green. It was spring. Yin noticed his gaze and suddenly touched the veil on her face. She warned him again. You said that when you see father later, you are not allowed to reveal anything. Do you understand? Okay. Yunsheng replied with difficulty. The drill ground was in a large empty space on the east side of the city gate. Yin had never been there before. After she returned to the capital with the army, Rufei replaced her. After that, she was not able to participate in any of the general Feihong activities. It was just that when she went on an outing as young Mistress Su, she happened to pass by it once. At that time, she looked forward to it very much. The drill ground in the capital was still very big. The flag on the flagpole was flying. Sometimes, the generals would review the troops here. That was very spacious. However, in the recent years of peace and prosperity, the drill ground had almost become a place where the children of the rich played riding and shooting. There were archery targets and running tracks everywhere. The weapons on the weapons rack were dazzling. When Yin walked to this place, she could not take her eyes off it. She once had a sword called Qinglang. It was indestructible and could cut through iron like mud. It accompanied her on the battlefield for many years. When she married into the Su family, she did not bring it along, even if she wanted to. Yuanqing said to her, "The Su family is a scholarly family. If you bring a sword with you, I'm afraid your husband and mother-in-law won't like it." Yuanliang, her biological father, also advised her with concern, "It's inauspicious." Therefore, she left Qinglang at home and instructed her family to take good care of it. However, when he returned home after the wedding, Qinglang was hung on Rufei's waist. She questioned Rufei, but before Rufei could say anything, Yuanqing said, "If it weren't for the fact that it's General Feihong now and the sword isn't here, people would be suspicious." That's right. In any case, you won't be able to use it in the future." Yuanliang supported. Her joy of returning home was like being doused with cold water, chilling her from head to toe. It was also at that time that she suddenly realized what marriage meant. What it meant to hand over the title of General Feihong. It meant that from now on, she was the Su family's eldest young mistress, the He family's second daughter. She would be at home assisting her husband and teaching her children. She would be at the same level as her husband. Her sword, her horse, her comrades, her freedom, her achievements and achievements that she had fought for, would all be given to someone else. And no one would know. First, it was her Qinglang. Then, it was her horse. Then, it was her subordinates. Her everything. All her hard work over the past few decades had become someone else's wedding dress. She had nothing. Yuanqing asked, "Hey, what's wrong? You don't look well." Yin was startled. When she came back to her senses, she smiled and said, "It's nothing." She looked left and right. "Why don't I see father? They seem to be over there." Yuanqing pointed to the track on the other side. "They're probably training the horses. The school often bought new horses. Some of them were wild and unruly, so they needed to be trained for a period of time. Nowadays, the rank of the gate commandant was extremely low. When they weren't patrolling the city, in a way, they were almost like training partners for the nobles who came to the school." "Let's go," Yuanqing said. Yin nodded and suddenly stopped. She picked up an iron head stick from the top of the weapon rack and held it in her hand. Yuanqing asked, "What are you going to do with this?" "Feel it." Yin said, "Let's go." Yuanqing was speechless. The two of them walked towards the track next to the stable. Before they got close, they heard a clamor. The two of them looked up. Two horses galloped past in front of them. On one of the horses sat a young master in brocade clothes. On the other horse sat a person who was as sturdy and dark as a black bear. Who else could it be but Sui? Who was Sui racing with? The young master is so awesome. The manservant who was watching next to him looked excited. 3 races, and he won every time. "Oh, it's already been 3 races." Yin raised his head and looked over. It didn't matter at first glance, but at first glance he frowned. The horse that Sui was riding probably hadn't been tamed in time. With one look, one could tell that it was wild and hard to tame. Its footsteps were very hurried. Sui was already struggling to ride this horse. That young master in embroidered clothes even deliberately used his own horse to knock Hisui's horse. He even saw that his horse whip hit Hisui's horse's butt. The wild horse was alive and kicking and almost threw Hisui off. Yunsheng called out, "Father." His heart was in pain. The young master in brocade clothes laughed. This battle was finally over. Hisui's horse came to a stop. When it came to a stop, it was with great difficulty. It struggled on the spot for quite a while before it finally calmed down. The young master in brocade clothes had already been helped off the horse. He said proudly, "Commandant, he is still not good enough. He can't even tame a horse. But this race is better than the previous one. At least he didn't fall down and get kicked by the horse." Fall down? Get kicked? Yin looked up at Hisui. The big man's face was bruised and swollen. There was a hoof print on his clothes. Obviously, he fell down hard. This guy. She couldn't help but feel a little angry. The young master in brocade clothes smiled and threw out a silver ingot. Good, good. I'm very happy. This is for you." The silver ingot fell to the ground. Hisui bent down to pick it up regardless of the other's eyes. Then he smiled and thanked. "Thank you, young Master Zhao." Yunsheng had never seen his father's humble side. He was furious and shouted, "What are you thanking me for? Can't you see he is playing with you?" "Yunsheng?" Hisui saw Yin and his son. He asked, Yin, why are you here? Who is this guy?" Young Master Zhao asked. "This is my son, Yunsheng." Hisui smiled apologetically. "Oh," young Master Zhao said, "your son seems to be very unhappy with me. What's wrong? Children are not sensible." Hisui pressed Yunsheng's head. "Quickly say sorry to young Master Zhao." "I don't." Yunsheng struggled. This young Master Zhao was clearly humiliating Hisui, toying with Hisui like a servant. But why? No matter how low Hisui's rank was, he was still an official and not a servant of the Zhao family. Why should he be humiliated like this? Yunsheng held his head high and refused to admit it. Young Master Zhao glanced at him as if his interest was piqued. "How about this? I originally planned to let your father have another round with me, but I've changed my mind. If you have another round with me, this young master will reward you with an ingot of silver." He stretched out his hand, and the servant handed over an ingot of silver. "No." Hisui was shocked at first. Then he bent down and smiled. "Yunsheng has never touched a horse before. Let me accompany you." Hisui usually favored Yin, but it did not mean that he did not love his son. This young Master Zhao was not a good person, but he was used to being humiliated by rich people. He did not care about this little bit of humiliation. Yunsheng should go to school at his age. And Yin, he should prepare some dowry for her. She could not go to her husband's house and be looked down upon when she got married. But he did not have any other skills. Other than selling his strength, he could only please these rich people and make money. Hisui didn't expect that his son and daughter would see his pathetic state today. Hisui felt ashamed and sad. Yunsheng was a young man. He could not stand these insults. But he did not know that people were evil. With his body, if he really had a horse race with young Master Zhao today, he would lose half of his life. One had to know that this horse was a new ownerless wild horse that had not been trained even once. Not to mention racing, it was not easy to even ride this horse. He could not let anything happen to his son. "I will do it." Hisui smiled. "No." Young Master Zhao shook his head. "I want him." Hisui's smile froze. In the stalemate, someone suddenly spoke. The clear voice broke the silence. "Or, I will have a race with you." Everyone looked to the side. The person who had been silent suddenly spoke. Then they realized that there was a girl standing there. She was wearing a light red and white short-sleeve coat with a long robe and a scarlet skirt. Niao niao, her face was covered with a white veil. Only a pair of beautiful eyes could be seen. She was smiling. "Who are you?" Young Master Zhao asked. "Me." The girl nodded slightly. "I am just a horse trainer." Chapter 14. Me? I'm just a horse trainer. The girl put her hands behind her back and held an iron rod. She shook it playfully and said in a relaxed tone, "Yin Yin?" Hisui was startled and scolded her in a low voice. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Yin didn't look at Hisui. She just stared at Master Zhao and said, "Master, are you willing to do it?" Young Master Zhao was a man who had tender feelings for the fairer sex. Although this young girl had a veil covering her face, he could tell that her appearance was not bad. Moreover, one would not slap a smiling face. Her voice was clear and melodious. Presumably, she was also a beauty. When a delicate beauty made a request, he would comply. "Miss, you don't know. This horse has a strong temperament. If it gets hurt because of this, I'll be very upset." He reminded her with good intentions. He felt that he was a gentleman. But just as he finished speaking, he heard the girl laugh. The next moment, he felt a blur in front of him. The red dress was like a lotus flower, bringing a fragrant wind. When he looked up again, He Yin was sitting upright on the horse's back, holding the reins. The horse was originally pulled by He Sui. He Sui didn't expect that He Yin would suddenly get on the horse. He let go of the reins and the horse was startled. It suddenly neighed and jumped up. "Yin Yin!" He Sui screamed. He Yunxing was also startled. He Yin didn't panic. She simply threw away the reins and grabbed the mane on the horse's neck. She held it tightly and didn't let the horse fall no matter how hard it struggled. She lowered her body and put her ear next to the horse's ear. She made a series of strange sounds. Strangely, gradually, the horse stopped struggling. It retracted its front hooves and calmed down. Everyone was surprised. "Yin Yin, come down." He Sui's heart was finally at ease. He hurriedly reached out to He Yin. "Don't fall." He Yunxing finally came to his senses. The boy bit his lips. His face was pale and his voice was trembling. "You, come down. Do you want to die?" Ha 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 ha. Young Master Zhao, who had been in a daze, suddenly laughed out loud. "I didn't expect this lady to be such an expert." Since that's the case, he also mounted his horse. "What's wrong with accompanying Miss?" She was indeed very charming. He Yin smiled faintly. "Then be careful, young master. I've said before that I'm a horse trainer." After saying this, she stretched out her hand and slapped the horse's butt, causing it to gallop away in a cloud of dust. "He's not using a horse whip?" Young Master Zhao mumbled. He then whipped his horse. "Let's go." The two horses kicked up a cloud of dust on the track, leaving behind a crowd of dumbfounded people. He Sui slowly turned to look at He Yunxing. He Yunxing quickly explained, "Don't ask me. I don't know when she learned how to ride a horse." He Sui seemed to be in a dream. He knew his own daughter best. She barely knew how to play the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She was outstanding in dressing and dressing. But when it came to riding a horse or swordsmanship, not to mention proficiency, it was already good enough that she didn't roll her eyes when she heard the name. He Yin liked those romantic and elegant young masters. She liked to drink tea, discuss poetry, and admire flowers under the moon. She stayed away from these uncouth things, afraid that they would hurt her delicate skin. But her posture of mounting the horse was so practiced, as if she had done it thousands of times and was used to it. She was even better than him, her father. That wild horse was as obedient as a kitten under her hands. She didn't even use a whip? How did she do it? He Sui looked at the figure on the track. He Sui couldn't tame the wild horse, but He Yin was as agile as the wind. Her posture was graceful. Because it was not convenient to wear a long dress, she pulled the dress aside to reveal the trousers inside. But not only was it not rough, there was an indescribable sense of elegance. Young Master Zhao couldn't catch up with her. Young Master Zhao was a little annoyed. He came to the school field to be in the limelight, not to lose face. He Sui made him very happy just now, but what was wrong with this girl? He couldn't lose to a woman, and this woman was riding a wild horse that hadn't been tamed. Did he want to be laughed at? Absolutely impossible. Suddenly, a competitive spirit grew in young Master Zhao's heart. He whipped the horse harder. The horse felt the pain and rushed forward. It was about to overtake He Yin. Yes, that's it. Looking at He Yin's figure getting closer and closer, young Master Zhao couldn't help but feel proud. He learned to ride when he was 7 years old. After so many years, how could he lose to a woman? His horse finally overtook He Yin. Young Master Zhao laughed out loud. "Miss, you have to work harder. Young Master is so brave." He Yin's voice was a little surprised. "It's also the first time someone has caught up with me." As she spoke, Her fingers touched the swinging iron head stick at her waist. Young Master Zhao's horse was in front. Her horse was behind. Just like that, the iron head stick stabbed the horse's butt. No one noticed this slight difference, except for the horse under young Master Zhao. The horse was startled and suddenly staggered. Young Master Zhao was caught off guard. His hand loosened, and the horse whip fell down. The next moment, the horse under him didn't listen to his command and rushed forward. Young Master Zhao didn't know what to do. He tightened the reins, but it was useless. "Stop, stop," he screamed. He was dizzy on the horse's back. A woman's anxious voice came from behind. "Young Master Zhao? Young Master Zhao, are you okay? Save me." Young Master Zhao was so scared that his voice became sobbing. "Tell it to stop." He Yen frowned in the distance. What happened? Why did I hear that young Master Zhao shouting for help? He Yen was shocked. At the end of the track, there were two horses running towards them. Young Master Zhao's horse was in front, but he didn't have a whip in his hand. Instead, he was holding the reins tightly and crying. He Yen was anxiously calling from behind, but she was as steady as Mount Tai. Young Master Zhao's horse seems to be startled. He Yen quickly went to the stable to get the horse. "I'll go help." Young Master. Young Master, the servant's face turned green. "Nothing must happen to you." Young Master Zhao was wailing like a ghost and howling like a wolf on the horse. He Yen used one hand to pick her ear. So noisy. Such an arrogant boy. If she didn't scare him to death, she wouldn't be called He Yen. In the past, there were many new recruits who thought they were better than others. In the end, they obediently accepted the reality. In this world, there was always someone better than you. As a person, it was better to keep a low profile. When she was done admiring the scenery, she saw He Sui starting to lead his horse over from afar. Only then did He Yen slap the horse's butt again, causing it to stop. She flew off the horse, her movements like lightning, one hand holding the iron head stick horizontally in front of young Master Zhao's horse's neck. The horse was abruptly stopped in its tracks and stood up. He Yen pulled the reins and shouted. "Shoo!" The horse quieted down. The wind blew, rolling up the white veil on her face. In a glimpse, the woman's face was revealed. It was only for a moment, but it was quickly covered by the white veil. "Okay," she said to the man who was crying on the horse's back. "You can come down now, young Master Zhao." "Woo woo, woo woo." Young Master Zhao started to cry. Chapter 15. The sobbing young Master Zhao wiped his tears with the back of his hand and cursed softly. When he got off the horse, his legs were weak and he almost fell. The servant quickly went over to support him and said, young Master, are you okay?" Young Master Zhao kicked him. "Do I look like I'm okay? You scared me to death just now." He Yen said, "It's all my fault. If I didn't insist on having a horse race with young Master wouldn't have been frightened." She was very apologetic and sincerely apologized. "I hope young Master won't take it to heart." Mind? What could he mind? The other party was his savior. How could he mind? Young Master Zhao forced a smile, but he was still holding back his anger. He looked at the main culprit's mount, which was still chewing on the grass with its head lowered. He was furious and waved his hand. This traitorous beast. It almost caused this young master to be injured. Drag it out and behead it. I'm going to cut him into pieces and make him into dried horse meat. He Yunsheng frowned, and He Yan's smile became cold. Horses, for a general, were not only a mount, but also a comrade who went through life and death together. They couldn't speak, but they would carry soldiers and charge into enemy lines. They couldn't communicate, but they would whine sadly after their master died, and even go on a hunger strike. They were loyal to their master, just like how their master loved them. Young masters from rich lands never understood the cruelty of the battlefield, so they couldn't understand the friendship between a man and a horse. People were divided into noble and lowly. A bastard was not worth his hesitation. If he wanted to kill it, he would just kill it. Why should he care about other things? "This is a good horse," He Sui said. He advised, "Young Master, you should think twice before you act. This is this young master's horse. Young Master Zhao had nowhere to vent his anger, and he Sui just bumped into him. He sneered. I can do whatever I want? He pulled out a dagger from his waist and said, I'm not only going to kill it, I'm going to kill it here. The hilt of the dagger was inlaid with a pigeon egg-sized ruby, and the scabbard was made of gold. It was gorgeous. Now, the tip of the knife was pointed at the horse that was gnawing on the grass. The horse still didn't know that its master had the intention to kill it. It swung its tail leisurely. Young Master Zhao's eyes were filled with killing intent as he thought of a good idea. Since this horse had frightened him and caused him to lose face, he might as well kill it right here and now. Firstly, it would help him vent his anger, and secondly, it would show off his bravery and regain some face. He shouted at the servant, Catch it for me. Yan's palms moved slightly. Unconsciously his hands reached for the iron cudgel on his waist. She could not see the horse die because of her. There was no reason for him to make a move. The horse was held down by a few manservants. The head manservant turned his head and shouted, Young Master, we are holding it down. Young Master, do it now. Young Master Zhao held a dagger in his hand and walked forward. He aimed it at the horse's neck, and the dagger was about to land. Bang! There was a crisp sound, as if metal and stone had collided. Something fell to the ground. Yan quietly withdrew his outstretched hand. The dagger in young Master Zhao's hand had already fallen. Young Master Zhao was holding his wrist and crying out, Io Io? Who is it? He stomped his feet in pain and did not forget to curse, Who the hell flicked me? It's me. Someone's voice came from behind. This voice. Yan's heart skipped a beat, and he turned around to look. He did not know when two people had appeared behind him, and they were both riding on horses. The young man on the left was wearing a licorice yellow robe with a round collar and slanted lapels. Such a provocative color made him look extremely lively. His lips were red and his teeth were white. He was smiling brightly, and his eyes were clear. There was a rare childlike innocence in him. He was a young man in high spirits. As for the young man on the right, Yan's eyes lit up. It was spring. The willows were new, and the ice and snow had melted. In the city of spring, there were people parting the flowers and brushing the willows. The young man in yellow was already very handsome, but this young man's eyebrows and eyes were even more beautiful than him. His face was like a beautiful jade, and his eyes were like stars. His eyes were gentle, but they were slightly raised at the end, like the reflection of autumn water. It was a good color that could stir people's hearts, but because of his gaze, it was as cold as ice. He was not as lively as the young man. He wore a silver crown on his head, and his black hair flowed down. He wore a frost-colored riding suit, and the lapel was embroidered with an exquisite vermilion bird with golden thread. He wore a pair of soap-green boots and a sparkling sword at his waist. The white horse was golden, and he was handsome and elegant. At this moment, his right hand was playing with a dark green pouch, and there was a tinkling sound coming from inside. What a handsome and elegant young master of the 5 Hills aristocratic families. Yan was praising him in her heart. Suddenly, she felt that something was wrong. In a flash, she lowered her head, and the white veil swayed slightly, covering her eyes. She only heard young Master Zhao's flattering and fearful voice. So it's Military Governor Xiao. I'm sorry. Yan suddenly remembered that many years ago, it was also a spring day like this. Orioles sang and swallows danced, and willows fell in 1,000 courtyards. She looked up in confusion and saw a handsome young man in a white robe and embroidered boots looking down from the treetops. Even though his expression was full of impatience, it could not hide his handsome appearance. The spring light was lazy, and the wind was beautiful. He was like a jade in a painting, dimming the spring scenery of the city. Xiao Ju, Xiao Huijin, her rival in her previous life, and her former classmate. He was also the famous military governor of the Right Army, General Feng Yun. Chapter 16. Yan lowered her head as the wind blew the white veil on her face. Beside her, she heard He Yunxing suck in a breath of cold air. He seemed to mutter in a low voice, Commander Xiao, It was probably because he saw the hero in his heart that he exclaimed in admiration, "Military Governor Xiao, why are you here?" Young Master Zhao was arrogant in front of He Sui and the others, but in front of Xiao Ju, he was like a dog wagging its tail and begging for mercy. It was disgusting. "How much did you spend on this horse?" The young man sat on the horse and asked calmly. "Huh." Young Master Zhao was a little confused, but he still answered honestly, 30 taels of silver." Xiao Ju's mouth twitched. In the next moment, 2 silver ingots flew out of the dark green pouch in her hand and landed on the grass. Everyone could see clearly that the thing that hit young Master Zhao's wrist was a silver ingot. "I'll buy your horse," he said. Young Master Zhao's lips trembled, but he couldn't say anything. He wanted to save his face by killing this ruining beast, but unfortunately, Xiao Huijin had spoken. He was the second son of a Xiao family. He couldn't afford to offend him. Young Master Zhao could only swallow his anger and smile. "Military Governor Xiao, what are you saying? If you want this horse, I'll give it to you." "No need," he said. "I don't deserve it." He Yin sighed in relief. Xiao Ju was a general like her, so she couldn't bear to see someone kill a horse in the middle of the street. When this horse met Xiao Ju, it managed to avoid a calamity. Just as he was thinking about this, He Yunsheng suddenly stepped forward. He looked at Xiao Ju with a face full of admiration and said, "Thank you, General Feng Yun. Saving a horse's life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda." Amazing. He Yin was speechless. Even if He Yunsheng wanted to strike up a conversation with his hero, he shouldn't have said that. How could he say such embarrassing words? He should have said to study more, otherwise he would end up like this. Xiao Ju was laughing at him. However, Xiao Ju did not say anything sarcastic today. Instead, she turned to look at He Yunsheng. Her clear eyes sparkled like stars as she asked, "Do you like this horse?" He Yunsheng glanced at it and answered honestly, "I like it. It's for you," he said. "Thank you." He Yunsheng was shocked and was about to say something when he saw that Xiao Ju and the yellow-clothed young man had already urged their horses forward. He didn't want to stay here any longer and could only chase after them for a few steps before stopping and looking at their backs disappointedly. He Yin walked up to him and waved his hand in front of him. "Are you back to your senses?" He Yunsheng retracted his gaze and turned around. "Where's Zhao?" "He left long ago." He Yin rolled his eyes, as if he couldn't stand He Yunsheng's silly look. "When you were looking at second young Master Xiao." Even if young Master Zhao was unwilling, he didn't dare to cause trouble for Xiao Ju. He could only take the money and leave angrily. He Yunsheng walked up to the horse that was abandoned by its owner. He touched the horse's head as if he was caressing a lover's keepsake and said, "This was given to me by General Feng Yun. Then why don't you bring it back and worship it? Set up a memorial tablet?" He Yin asked. He Yunsheng glared at her. "What do you know? If Military Governor Xiao didn't pass by just now, this horse would have been killed by that Zhao guy. Military Governor Xiao is indeed a young hero. When he sees injustice on the road, he pulls out his sword to help." "Stop, stop, stop." He Yin interrupted him. "Say something else." She thought that He Yunsheng was indeed a child who didn't know the evils of the world. Xiao Huijin wasn't a chivalrous hero who saw injustice on the road. This person was very heartless. "Yin Yin, why did you come out wearing a veil?" He Sui, who hadn't spoken much, finally found a chance to speak. "Also, how did you know how to ride a horse? Father was scared to death just now. You can't be so reckless in the future. If something happens to you, how can I explain it to your mother in the future?" He Sui spoke much more to He Yin than to He Yunsheng. "This is my recent makeup. It's a trend in the capital to wear a veil when going out. It looks mysterious and beautiful." He Yin spoke nonsense seriously. "Father, do you think it doesn't look good?" He Sui, "Good, good, good. It looks very good." He Yunsheng rolled his eyes. He Sui actually believed such a clumsy excuse. He Sui naturally believed it. He didn't know much about these girls' playthings. He only knew that He Yin always liked to dress up. It was natural for her to follow the trend. Moreover, he would never think that his arrogant and weak daughter would go to a gambling den to fight with others. It must have been a mistake. "As for riding a horse, I learned it with a friend. I only know a few tricks. I'll practice more in the future," He Yin said vaguely. On the other side, Xiaoju and the boy in yellow were riding their horses out of the school grounds. It was really interesting just now. The boy in yellow laughed. Uncle, did you see that? The girl on the horse secretly did something. That's why that Zhao guy fell. It was fun. Xiaoju's expression was indifferent. He did see it. They just happened to pass by the outskirts of the school grounds. The girl's movements were agile. When that Zhao guy wanted to kill the horse, he believed that even if he didn't say anything, she would have done it. Her hand was already reaching for the iron head stick at her waist. It's a pity that she kept her head down. I didn't see what she looked like. The boy in yellow rubbed his chin. Why don't we go back now and ask for her name? Maybe we can see what she looks like. Go by yourself. Xiaoju was unmoved. That won't do. She looked at you before lowering her head. She must have been shocked by Uncle's beauty and became shy. I think that there are more interesting girls in the capital recently. A few days ago, I saw the girl at the bottom of the drunken jade tower who fought against 10 people by herself. Today, I saw the girl riding a horse at the school grounds. There are so many good girls in the world. Why can't any of them belong to me? The boy in yellow sighed and beat his chest. Xiaoju looked at him calmly. Chung Li Su, if you don't shut up, I'll send you back to the Chung family. No. The boy named Chung Li Su immediately sat up straight. You're my biological uncle. You can't just watch me die. I'm relying on you now. As they spoke, they suddenly saw a few people standing not far from the weapons rack. The leader was a young man in blue. He was thin and looked like an immortal. He looked at them with a smile. They didn't know how long he had been standing there, but from where he was, he must have seen everything that happened at the school grounds. Isn't this the 4th young master of Shi Jin's household? Chung Li Su whispered. Why is he here? Xiaoju didn't answer. The horse stopped and Chung Li Su showed his usual warm smile. Isn't this Brother's Island? Why is Brother's Island here? This was the 4th son of Shi Jin, Chu Zhao. I was just walking around. I didn't expect to meet Military Governor Xiao and young Master Chung here. Chu Zhao smiled. Are you also here for a walk? Of course. The spring weather is so good these days. Wouldn't it be a waste if we didn't come out to play? Chung Li Su laughed loudly. As he laughed, he muttered, but it would be even better if we came out with beautiful girls. Chu Zhao pretended not to hear him. His smile didn't change. From beginning to end, Xiaoju didn't say a word to Chu Zhao. She only nodded slightly at him when they passed by. When they passed by, the page boy was indignant. This General Feng Yun is too rude. Chu Zhao didn't care. He only smiled and shook his head. Who told him to be Xiao Huijin? Then, he looked at the empty track again. He seemed to have thought of something very interesting and chuckled. Chapter 17. He went to the drill ground empty-handed, and when he came back, he had a horse in his hand. Yunsheng felt like he was trying to gain something without risking anything. When he thought of this, he quickly spat a few times in his heart. How could this be called gaining something without risking anything? This was a gift from a hero. But that General Feng Yun was even more handsome and elegant than the rumors said. When would he become someone like second young Master Xiao? He Sui looked at Yunsheng. The young man's face was full of reverie, and he didn't know where his mind was. It was rare to see him so energetic. He looked at Yin. Although his face was covered, he seemed to have a lot on his mind. What's wrong with this son and daughter? On the way back, they didn't say anything, each thinking about their own things. Yunsheng could say that Xiao Huijin had given him a horse, but why was Yin also silent? Xiao Huijin was young and promising, and he was also one of the most handsome men in Dawei. Could it be that his daughter had taken a fancy to him? What should he do? Young Master Fan had just left, and now Military Governor Xiao had come? There were countless young Master Fans in the capital, but there was only one Xiao Huijin in Dawei. When he thought of this, Sui felt a headache coming on. The 3 of them returned home with a lot on their minds. Aunt Li, who sold tofu next door, looked at them curiously. She even pulled Sui aside and asked with concern, Brother did something happen at home? It seems like Yin and Yunsheng have something on their minds. Sui didn't know what to say. When they entered the room, Qing Mei had already prepared dinner. Everyone was eating porridge. As they ate, Sui finally remembered to ask, Yin, why did you come to the drill ground today? He Yunsheng was fine, but He Yin never came to the drill ground. He Yin collected his thoughts and said to He Sui, it's like this. Originally, I wanted to tell father that Yunsheng should enter school at his age. The martial arts he learned on a daily basis were not as good as his master's teachings. It's not too late now. Spring is the time to start school. What do you think, father? He Sui opened his mouth. For a moment, he didn't know whether to be gratified that his daughter was starting to worry about her brother or worried that he couldn't answer He Yan's question. Yin Yin, I've thought about this before, but right now, I'm still short of some money. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly. I might have to wait a little longer. When I get my monthly salary, I'll raise some more money. If it wasn't for this, he wouldn't have tolerated young Master Zhao's humiliation. He Yunsheng lowered his head to eat, but his ears were pricked up. He knew that it was not easy for his father to earn money. He always felt that if he brought it up, it would be unfilial of him. He Yin finally said these words that were hard to say, and he let out a sigh of relief. You don't have to worry about the silver. He Yin got up and walked into the inner room. After a while, she came out with a makeup box. She opened the makeup box. He Sui and Qing Mei were dazzled by the jewelry and silver inside. He Sui's chopsticks fell to the ground. Yin Yin, where did this silver come from? Yunsheng went to Lu Tong village and won it. He Yin answered fluently. He Yunsheng spat out a mouthful of porridge. He Yin blinked at him. Her expression didn't change when she lied. Yunsheng's luck is really good. The first time he went to Lu Tong village, he won a lot of silver. I counted it. The silver is enough for us to use for a few years. He Yunsheng moved his lips, but didn't say anything. What could he say? He Yin said that the person who gambled was him. He Sui didn't believe it. Even he didn't believe it. Moreover, He Yin was wearing his clothes that day. Other people only remembered that he was a teenager. He really couldn't explain himself. Moreover, when he thought of the scene when He Yin stood up for him and raced the horse with that surnamed Zhao, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Just take it as being loyal. He will take the blame for this. He Yunsheng said, yes, I won it from gambling. Father, let's take this silver to school. He Sui looked at him steadily. You won this at the casino?
Yes.
The first time you went to the casino, you won a big victory? Indeed. Indeed. He Sui flew into a rage. He slammed the table, picked up a piece of wood from the table, and hit He Yunsheng. You unfilial son. You actually dared to go to Lu Tong village. Your father worked hard to provide for you, but you actually dared to go to Lu Tong village. Do you have any shame? How can you face your dead mother? He Yunsheng covered his head and scurried away. Father, it's because our family is too poor. If you didn't tell my mother, how would she know? You're still quibbling. Where did you learn this dissolute habit? Go to the casino. He Yunsheng, I think you're going to overturn the heavens. He Yin silently shrank into a corner of the room. What a close call, what a close call. He Yunsheng had to take the blame for this. He Sui knew that she was the one who did it. What if she accidentally hit He Sui back and hurt him? Then she would really be an unfilial daughter. After a round of chaos, this matter finally came to an end. In the end, He Yunsheng was beaten up, but he still managed to gloss over this matter. The next step was to consider which school in the capital to choose for He Yunsheng. It would be best to choose a school that had both martial arts skills and skills. It couldn't be too bad or too good. Birds of a feather flock together. The best schools were all for the children of wealthy families. It was inevitable that He Yunsheng would be contaminated with some bad habits. He Yunsheng sat in He Yan's room and tapped the small comb on the table against the lampstand. He said, I can't find a good school after so many choices. It's really giving me a headache. It's not something that can be decided in one night. He Yin glanced at him. There's still plenty of time in the future. He Yunsheng curled his lips. Now that you're experienced and knowledgeable, don't you know which school in the capital is the best? I don't go to school. What do I know? He Yin said. I know about gambling. He Yunsheng said. Then I really underestimated you. He Yin smiled at him. Thank you for the compliment. Thinking about the beating he received tonight, He Yunsheng felt sullen again. He said, I'm going to feed the horses. Then he left. After He Yunsheng left, Qing Mei took away the basin for washing up. He Yin blew out the candles, took off his shoes, and went to bed. The windows were not closed. In this kind of spring night, she did not feel cold. The moonlight came in through the window and overflowed the table. She looked at the table and thought of Xiao Ju she met during the day. At that time, she was in a panic. She was afraid that Xiao Ju would recognize her, so she lowered her head. But later, when she came back to her senses, she was no longer He Yin. Even if they were face to face, Xiao Ju would not recognize her. Moreover, she always wore a mask in the past. The last time she saw Xiao Ju seemed to be a long time ago. At that time, he was not as cold and indifferent as he was now. He was an arrogant but undisciplined youth. The best school in the capital was called Xianchang School. Today, Dewey's two famous generals, General Fengyun and General Fei Hong, both came from this school. Come to think of it, she and Xiao Ju had only been classmates for a year. Chapter 18. Everyone said that General Fei Hong and General Fengyun were as incompatible as fire and water, fighting openly and covertly. But in fact, He Yin always felt that it wasn't that exaggerated. At most, they were both young men who joined the army, had outstanding military achievements, and were bestowed by the emperor at a young age. Everyone liked to compare them together. The others were just hearsay, embellished with oil and vinegar. After being passed around, they became unfamiliar books, making people not know whether to laugh or cry. At least in the heart of the 14-year-old He Yin, she definitely didn't have the slightest bit of hostility towards this young master of the Shao family. At that time, she had already disguised herself as a man for many years, and being He Rufei was a piece of cake. There was only one thing that was slightly difficult, and that was that at this age, boys should have long gone to the academy to learn from the teachers. Men and women were different. Women could invite teachers to come to the residence to teach, but men didn't have such a thing. The He family had always invited teachers to teach in the residence, but as they grew older, it wouldn't be good if word got out. In the end, the He family still wanted to save face. Therefore, they dragged their feet and dilly-dallied. In the end, when He Yin was 14 years old, she was sent to the Xianchangguan. The Xianchangguan was the most famous school in the capital. The founder of the school was once the current emperor's imperial tutor when he was the crown prince. The school taught the 6 arts, and each teacher was an outstanding person in the imperial court. Those who came to learn were nobles among nobles. Although the He family had a noble title, compared to the families in the Xianchangguan, they were still slightly inferior. Who knew that He Yuanliang had some kind of good luck? One day, when he was drinking in a restaurant, he came across a dispute and casually said a few words. The person he helped turned out to be a teacher in the Xianchangguan. He mentioned that it just so happened that there was a new student coming to the school in the spring. He remembered that the He family's first branch seemed to have a legitimate son, so why not send him to the Xianchangguan to learn from him? He Yuanliang hesitated for a long time before discussing this matter with He Yuanqing. He Yuanqing had always pursued fame and profit, so he felt that this matter was feasible. If He Yin was sent to the Xianchangguan, she might get to know a lot of other nobles. Being on good terms with them would only be good for the He family, and there would be no harm. If one day, the real He Rufei returned, the title of Xianchangguan student would be icing on the cake for He Rufei. He Yin was very happy when he heard about this. She dressed as a man, but in the He family, she acted according to the rules of a woman. He couldn't play kuju, couldn't show his face in public, and even had to secretly learn martial arts behind his family's back. However, if one were to say that she was a woman, then she was also incompetent. The daughters of the He family learned the 4 arts, but she, as He Rufei, could not follow them. It was as if he couldn't do anything. However, going to the Virtuous Prosperity Hall was different. It was said that there were many capable people there. Those who came and went were all talented people. There were also many youths of the same age. If they went, not only would they be able to learn some skills, they would also be able to make many friends. This was a benefit that women could not enjoy. She was suddenly glad that she had taken He Rufei's identity. He Yuanqing's wife, her mother in name, and her actual aunt, handed the mask that had been meticulously made by the craftsman to her. She said worriedly, "You must be careful when you go. You must not let anyone discover your identity." He Yin nodded. In fact, She didn't like wearing this mask. Although the mask was light, it was airtight, only revealing her chin and eyes. For so many years, she had never left the mask. She even wore it when she was sleeping. The craftsman was very skillful. One side of the mask was fastened into her hair bun and installed with a mechanism. Even if she fought, it would not fall off. Only she could open it. "Madam," he seriously warned, "remember, if you leak the trap, the entire He family will be destroyed." She knew that these words had been said thousands of times. The crime of deceiving the emperor would implicate 9 generations of the family. "I'll keep that in mind," He Yin replied respectfully. "Madam," he anxiously sent her to the carriage. In the eyes of outsiders, this was a scene of deep affection between mother and child. In He Yan's heart, she was greatly relieved. Her chest was overflowing with the joy of being free. She finally broke free from the days where her every move was controlled. Freedom was in front of her eyes. The carriage stopped at the entrance of the Virtuous Prosperity Hall. The servant sent her off the carriage and could only wait at the entrance for her to finish school. She came too early. The teacher had not yet arrived at the school. She could vaguely hear the sound of students reading and chatting. He Yin stepped through the door, full of longing. The spring sun came out early in the morning. After entering the school, there was a large yard first, then a garden, and finally the school. There was a stable in the yard, which looked like a small drill ground. The garden was very elegantly renovated. There was a pond and willow trees. There was also a swing. The wind blew the swing slightly. He Yin reached out and wanted to sit on it, but she didn't dare to. If a man played on a swing, she was afraid that people would laugh at her. She could only reluctantly touch it before continuing to walk forward. The willow trees had all sprouted. Clusters of green flowers fell into the lake, which made the mountain look more beautiful. The sunlight made people sleepy. She rubbed her eyes and saw a loquat tree in front of her. The He family didn't lack money to eat loquats. In these years, He Yin also ate loquats. But this was the first time she saw a loquat tree full of fruit. The yellow fruit seemed to contain honey. It was full and fragrant. Under the sunlight, it was very tempting. She was only a 14-year-old girl, but she was very playful. Seeing this scene, she remembered the scene of the servant girls in the courtyard picking plums with bamboo poles in the summer. It was just that the eldest young master of the He family naturally couldn't pick plums himself. But now that they were in the school, picking a loquat should be fine, right? It wasn't shameful for a boy to pick loquats. Thinking of this, He Yin rolled up her sleeves and prepared to go all out. But she came out in a hurry. Other than the bundle, paper, and pen that she gave to the teacher, she didn't have anything else. There was also no long pole around. Fortunately, the loquat tree wasn't very tall. She should be able to reach it by jumping. He Yin stared at the nearest fruit in front of her. The fruit was pressed against the top of the branch. It was heavy and golden, as if it was tempting her to pick it. She jumped with all her might, but she missed. Almost. He Yin wasn't discouraged. She persevered and jumped with all her might. She still missed. She had a personality that didn't admit defeat, so she tried again. Again, she missed. She failed again and again. She didn't know how many times she failed. Just when He Yin was tired and panting, she suddenly heard a sneer from above her head. He Yin looked up in confusion. The loquat tree was lush with branches and leaves. She only stared at the fruit and didn't notice that there was someone sitting on the tree. She didn't know how long this person had been sitting here. He probably had a panoramic view of all her actions. She looked up. The sunlight shone down, illuminating this person's face inch by inch. This was a beautiful young man in a white robe and embroidered boots. He looked lazy and arrogant. With his hands behind his head, he looked bright and elegant like a cool breeze leaning on a jade tree. He impatiently looked down. His eyes were moving. He Yin was stunned. She had never seen such a good-looking young man. It was as if the whole spring scenery was shining on him. For a moment, she felt ashamed. Fortunately, the mask covered her blushing face. But in the end, she was still young and couldn't hide the amazement in her eyes. After the handsome young man glanced at her, he casually pulled a fruit down. Was he giving it to her? He Yin felt a burst of shyness. The young man suddenly turned over and landed on the ground. He Yan's eyes were dazzled by his white robe. She looked at the young man approaching with the fruit. For a moment, she hesitated and didn't know what to say. Should she say thank you? Or should she say that you are really good-looking? She was so nervous that she wanted to reach out and twist the hem of her clothes. The young man had already walked in front of her. Suddenly, he smiled. This smile was like 1,000 flowers blooming. It was as bright as the spring dawn. Yin said excitedly, "Thank." Before she could finish the second thank you, the young man brushed past her. Yin? Question mark. She looked back and saw the young man in the white robe tossing the big yellow loquat up and down as he walked forward. His posture was leisurely, as if he was laughing at her unrequited love. Yin stood in the same place. After calming down for a while, she followed the young man into the school. However, she had just walked to the entrance of the school when she heard people talking inside. It was very lively. A cheerful voice asked, "I heard that the new eldest young master of the He family is also coming to our school today. Brother Huijin, did you see him?" She took a step forward and secretly peeked through the crack in the window. She heard a lazy voice say, "I didn't see the eldest young master of the He family. I only saw a stupid and short person." Stupid and short? Yin had never been talked about like this in her life. It was fine if she was stupid, but short? Short? How was she short? Her height, compared to other girls her age, was already considered to be very outstanding. Yin wanted to see which blind person would come up with such a conclusion. As soon as he raised his eyes, he saw the bright and pretty young man who was surrounded by the group of young men. His eyes were nonchalantly looking towards the crack in the window. It was as if he knew that she was peeping. Bursts of laughter came from the school. The world of grass and trees was boundless. Spring was lush, and the forest flowers were like brocade. This was the first time she met Xiaoju. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.